Everybody coming in this morning. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Brian Humphrey. I work in the district office, and our office oversees athletics. And we've had this meeting for a couple of years in a row, and then COVID hit, so we've not had it in a few years. So since our last meeting, there has been quite a few changes in policies, in statute. And this meeting, it's actually over the last few years has grown super important because everything that you do can be scrutinized, and then oftentimes is scrutinized, and the responsibilities that are stacked onto coaches has increased every year. And it keeps getting more and more and more. So but raise your hand if you went and got CPR certified this past year, which is a wonderful thing. Yeah, we've got probably 80-90% of our coaches now CPR AED certified, which is a new requirement. It's a wonderful thing, but it's just another thing that's added to your already responsibilities. And I can remember a long time ago when I was hired as a coach, they just handed me some keys on a shoestring, and it was the keys to the equipment closet, and that was my training. And then I was lucky enough to work with a lot of good people, and so would catch on, but that was many years ago. So we put this training together to help each and every one of you answer questions on how you can run your program and not get you in trouble and not get the district in trouble. So that's our goal. So the Florida High School Athletic Association, the eligibility department, and that's the department that we need to make sure that we know the rules, we follow the rules, you stay within the rules, and that keeps your program out of trouble. So FHSAA has been gracious to us in the past, and Mr. Craig Damon is always gracious about coming to Okaloosa County and sharing updates and rules and policies with our districts. And he's always been wonderful about, if you've got a question, you can ask the question, he knows the answer. So if you hear something today that you're not clear on, or you've got a question, or there's something specific at your school, now's a great time to get an answer from him. And if he can't give you the answer, he will find somebody that will eventually get you the answer. So, Mr. Craig Damon.
Good morning. Just before I begin my presentation today, just want to share with you guys on behalf of the association how grateful we are for what you did this past season. About this time last year, we weren't sure what was going to happen with sports. Everybody was a little uncertain. There was some debating going on. Some of you sat and watched those 5-hour Zoom meetings that was taking place during the summer that became almost like a reality show on YouTube. But through your efforts and your commitments, our students were afforded the opportunity to play sports this year, probably more than any other state in the country. So it was at our summer conference about 3 weeks ago, and one of the things that folks talked about was how they went through the pandemic, and some states were just playing their state championships in the end of June, 1st of July, because they delayed a long time and hit short seasons. I know North Carolina, they didn't even start their sports until January and did 3 seasons from January to June. So very grateful for the effort that you guys put in today. During my presentation, please stop me at any point in time and ask questions. There's some slides up there. Tried to cover things that I think are important. Talked with Brian last night, and he shared some things with me that I threw some slides in afterwards, but at any point in time, stop me. I'm not going to tell you I have all the answers, because there's going to be some questions going to come up that I don't have an answer for. You may hear me just tell you it's state statute, and it's a law that I have to follow just like you guys have to follow. Some of my answers is going to be it's a Okaloosa County deal. I don't have authorization to tell Okaloosa County how to do what state statute gives them the authority to do. So just want to make that known before we get going. And again, like I say, if there's anything you can ask, you have questions, please stop me at any point in time. Put the picture of the association building on the front because a lot of folks have never been to our office, don't even know what our office looks like. A lot of folks think that our office is in Tallahassee. We're in Gainesville. So that picture's on the front just for that purpose. The agenda for today, I'm going to talk about the various seasons that the association, that we label, just so we all on the same page with that. We'll talk about some obligations of being a member of the association. Going to talk about NIL. I don't know if you've heard about NIL, name, image, and likeness. That's something that we're getting numerous phone calls on here recently. Going to talk about the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, which just passed and went into effect on July 1st. Then here's some updates, and lastly, some most common violations in that order. Today. All right, there's three seasons that we recognize with the association. We have two of those seasons take place during the school year. That's in your in-sport season, so whenever your sports season goes, if it's a fall sport, it's during the fall, winter sport during the winter, spring sport during the spring. It's your school team. Only your eligible students or non-traditional students that have gone through the process may participate for you. Also during the school year, outside of your sports season is what we call the off-season. So the off-season consists of any time during the school year that is outside of the last competition of your sports season, state championship, depends on how far you go. Anything outside of that during the school year is considered off-season. The day after the last day of school, whenever your last day of school is, until the Sunday before fall practices start, is considered summer. During the summer is when, per our policy 20, we don't regulate what you do with your kids. And the key term to that is what you do with your kids, meaning that those are your previously enrolled students that are carrying over, or any new student that has changed schools and completed all their registration paperwork to be a part of your school, or any non-traditional student who has registered their intent to participate with your school the next year. Obligations of membership, and these are things that are listed in bylaw that typically fall under the authority of the principal, but just to make sure, the big one I want to focus on is compliance with the rules. As a member school of the association, there's 770 high schools throughout the state, and there's 24 people on staff. There's 4 people that work in my department. There's no way that we can monitor everything that everybody does in the state of Florida on that level. So we depend on the FHSA representative at each school to wear 2 hats. You wear your school colors, but you also wear the colors of the association, and you're the person that is designated by the principal to be responsible for making sure your school is in compliance. And the 4 things that, again, student eligibility is the number one thing that you are charged with doing. Cooperating with the association, attendance at compliance seminars and audits. But the big thing is student eligibility. Student eligibility means making sure if a kid has not falsified anything, that they have the right GPA, they have not received the impermissible benefit or had improper contact to get to your school. All of our bylaws and policies, that falls underneath that, that deals with student eligibility. That comes from you guys, because you make the initial ruling, your AD, whether a kid is eligible or not for that season. Obligations of membership, and again, schools responsible to ensure that students are eligible, that any student that is not eligible, that doesn't meet any of our eligibility requirements, are not allowed to represent your school. And the 2 that we really want to look at is ineligible students, not letting ineligible students participate. And the second one is falsification of information. Conversation last night, and I know Brian was talking about how much, how easily it is for us to come to Okaloosa County for this presentation. He didn't tell you the real reason why. The real reason why is always the night before. The night before we go to McGuire's and I get that smoked prime rib. So anytime he called and asked about coming, I'm coming because I know I'll get an opportunity to go to McGuire's to get that smoked prime rib. So I wish we could do this about 3 or 4 times a year just because I would like to taste some other things on the menu, but that smoked prime rib is the best, and I look forward to coming here all the time. So we were discussing some things last night. I know some of the questions that come up, at least to his office, about kids turning in an address and not living in an address. They got this address because as long as I show up to the school with some form of a lease that says that I live in a certain attendance zone, then I get admissions into that school. Just understand, as a school, you're responsible for going and checking to make sure people actually live in that house, and it's just not something that's turned in for falsification. Falsification per state statute in our bylaws says that kid loses a year of eligibility at any member school. So please do your due diligence. If you're athletic director at your school, if there's some smoke there, go check it out. Send the school social worker out. Send someone out from the district office to check to see that people are actually living where they say they're living, because if they don't, and somebody sends an allegation in and or some videos or pictures, and it's proven, the kid's going to lose eligibility, but it's also going to impact those 25, 30 other kids that were on the team that may have won a state championship or may have won 25 games or 10 football games in football. All those games are going to get forfeited, and there's going to be a fine and, all those other things, when only thing it took was just a social worker to go out and make a visit. Some of the other districts, I can tell you about Hillsborough County, they have several officers, and they send people out all the time, 3 or 4 times, just to ensure that they don't want that to have that conversation with a group of parents about why don't we do everything within our power to make sure that the kids that say they were living in certain places, if we knew that kid was a question mark, to ensure that they were where they're supposed to be. District personnel check on it. Sometimes the assistant principals or school resource officers, they may send them out they set it up and they go out and they have an actual form. Hillsborough County has an actual form where the person that asks all these questions, they look for certain things in the house. They go look in the closet to see if clothes in there. They look to see if there's actual evidence of someone living in that home. And even as AD at a school, if I feel that there's a kid that's coming over and I don't feel, just get this little feeling in my stomach that, why did that happen? Go and check. I mean, it's better to go and check ahead of time and be proactive and take some actions before you start playing contests, as opposed to letting the kid play all year long and you win a state title and now you turn that trophy back into our office because you had an ineligible player that played for you all year long. Right. And what that should do is it makes you go and ask, did the parents or the people in the home, do they have legal custody of that kid? Through the court system, not the little affidavit that you get notarized by, me or anybody else that's a notary. No, it's through the court system, changing custody. And with that, then it's not an impermissible benefit. And then it's changed to at least one person that was living in the home previously moved with the kid. I know some districts have not just a lease. They may ask for driver's license to represent that show that the new address changed. They may ask for voter's registration card to show that there's an address change. Bills, I think I was just talking to in Orange County. I was there on Tuesday on a presentation. I think they asked for like 6 forms of some sort of documentation to show that there was an actual address change, not just a lease. Name, image, and likeness. I don't know if you guys have been hearing about that up here, but name, image, and likeness is huge. Once the governor started talking about that, we had parents calling our office left and right. And the key part of name, image, and likeness is Florida Statute 1674. It is for collegiate athletes and post-secondary institutions. High schools is a secondary institution. And high school athletes are not collegiate athletes. So that state law does not apply to high school athletes. I share this with you because we are getting a bunch of phone calls from parents and from various organizations trying to use name, image, and likeness of some of our high school kids, and just ask you to please be very vigilant, ask questions. If you know you have some elite athletes, I can promise you somebody's trying to take advantage of their name, image, and likeness and probably offering them some money. And next slide, Brian. This kid here, Mickey Williams, 10th grader, North Carolina, plays for one of the independent schools in North Carolina that's not part of the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. 10th grader, signed a $1 million contract with the company for his name, image, and likeness. Still has 2 years of high school eligibility. Fortunately for him, the school that he's a part of and the little league they don't have anything that prohibits the kid from earning money. So he's able to earn that $1 million that he's got, plus continue playing for the little Christian high school that he plays for, because their organization does not prohibit kids from taking advantage of or receiving compensation for their performance. Next slide. Our bylaw 9, it hasn't changed, 9.9. It's still, in order to be an amateur, you cannot, number C, you cannot receive or capitalize off of your name, image, or your fame or performance and receive any type of cash or monetary value without losing a year eligibility in that sport. Our amateur bylaw says that if I'm a basketball player and I use my name, image, and likeness to receive funds in basketball, I lose eligibility for 1 year in the sport of basketball. Doesn't stop me from playing other sports. It's just only the sport that I choose to, or that I have received any type of compensation for. So that's something that's a little different. I foresee this happening here very soon in the state of Florida. And the sport I think it's going to happen in is going to be basketball. It's not going to be boys basketball. Not going to be high school basketball, but it's going to be club basketball. Some of these elite Team Florida, Team Nike teams where they play all over the country during that club season, I can guarantee you that some company is going to think, if I can get in with this kid now and give them a little bit of money now and they go play 1 year in college and then go pros, I got a better chance of getting them to endorse my product 2 years from now or 3 years from now by getting in with those folks right now. So I am actively trying to be proactive to speak to the USSSA, USA, AAU folks and say, hey, listen, please understand that our bylaws for a kid that wants to play in the state of Florida at a high school, they cannot receive any type of compensation. So please, if I need to make up a flyer that you post on your website, just let them know in the state of Florida, there's a chance that you could lose your eligibility. I have no problem doing so, but gotta get the word out to our club teams, because I think that's where it's going to happen. It could get to a point 10 years from now, if this continues, where kids are choosing to play club when they can get paid for their name, image, and likeness, as opposed to playing for their high school team, where it's just playing for the love of the game. So that's something that we hope never happens, but if this trend continues, it could very easily happen. I was talking with a lady the other day, has a son that's at a Division III school, and he's the backup running back at the Division III school. This company reached out to him and said, hey, if you just like things that we post, we'll give you $100 per month. If you retweet anything that we post or copy it and paste it or whatever, we'll give you $100 for every time you do that. And he's been just getting money, and money actually automatically goes into his Venmo account each month, every time he does it. So a Division III athlete that is not even a starter at a Division III school, that's been offered to him by different companies, because social media has been the way that I think a lot of people are using for advertising now. Instead of paying for commercials, it reaches people a whole lot quicker. Depends on how many followers and stuff that you have. So they're doing that. Heard also down in Miami, there's a fitness center down there that offered all the University of Miami football players that on scholarship, $500 per month if they just stop by and take a picture and post it on their social media pages. So it's all over. Me personally, I would hate to think, being at some of the major universities and, the star quarterback, star running back that's getting hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars for name, image, and likeness, and I'm that offensive lineman that's blocking for him every down, and I'm only getting, $100 per month when this guy's getting, several ones. I can see being a part of being a coach, being a part of teams, it can create some conflict on your team based on, hey, I'm the one that's blocking for you so you can run for all those yards, and I'm getting $10 and you getting, thousands of dollars for your name, image, and likeness. But that's something that the NCAA has to deal with, and I think their approach to it was they weren't necessarily completely against giving folks money, but they wanted to put some standards where it was sort of equal across the board, where it wasn't the fluctuation that's there. The Fairness in Women's Sports Act. I don't know if you followed that in legislation this year. It sort of went strictly along party line with how it was introduced. It gained momentum and then sort of stalled a little bit. And on the last couple of days of legislative session, it got thrown on the back of a charter bill that was a bipartisan approval type deal. So what that does, we have a policy 16.8 that deals with gender identity. It's a gender identity review. So a student that identifies differently than what their birth certificate says and want to participate on a gender-specific team, different than what their birth certificate says, they can go through this process. It's outlined where the student and the parent has to notify the school before the beginning of the sports season that they're interested in participating in a team-specific gender sport that's different than what their birth certificate says. They send notify me in writing that they want to go through the review. There's a whole page of documents that things that they must turn in, and then they go in front of a review panel. The review panel is made up of a coach in that sport that's not from that area, an AD that's not from the same section of the state that kid is from, and then there's 3 or 4 doctors that have professional or experience in transgender, gender identity that's on this panel. They look at the documentation. The kid actually gets to speak to them. They ask questions, and they make a ruling. Since 2013, when we put this policy in place, there's been a total of 11 athletes that have gone through the process, and all 11 were approved. Of the 11, 2 were students that were born male that identified as female. I think the first one was back in 2013, and then I had a student probably about 4 years ago that went through the process. The other 9 were born female that identified as males. Went back and tried to look to see if any were ever on a roster through home campus. I have not seen any of the names that were recently on a roster, so in my opinion, or my theory from what I've seen, is that kids went through the process, but I don't know if any ever competed. We never had any complaints to our office about it being a either competitive advantage or unfair advantage about it. But however, state law has passed, so our policy is in place, but it's not in place. The policy right now only impacts a student whose birth certificate, original birth certificate, says female, that identifies or is transitioning to male and want to participate on a male sport team. They can go through the process. However, with this new state law, a student that was born a male, well, original birth certificate says male, and that are either transitioning to female or identifies as female, state law says they cannot participate on a female team. So the short and sweet of it, the short part of it is that 16.8 still applies for a student whose original birth certificate says female that identifies as male or transitions to male. But if a student's original birth certificate says male, then they cannot participate right now. We've already, state of Florida, Governor DeSantis, DOE, our association has already been sued by a kid out of Broward County. I mean, almost the day after it went into effect, they filed a lawsuit. So, and there's several other lawsuits throughout the country, you know, where there's a difference of opinion between the federal government and state governments about Title IX and what Title IX actually protects. So, just want you guys to be aware of that one. Next slide, bro. Some updates, bylaw 961, which deals with age. Representative Assembly met and they changed that, so now it's not 19 before September 1st or after September 1st, it's 19 after July 1st. The reason for the change was there was a proposal to change this bylaw from one of our member schools, a school that basically 90% of their students are special needs, students that have been retained based on their disability at some point in time. So they asked for August the 1st. And when they asked for it, I went back and did a study, looked at the past 3 years. And over the past 3 years, kids that have come to section appeals or even been to our board of directors, they had a birthday to July 1st or after, were approved 100% of the time and was given a full year of eligibility. So it's like if that's what our schools or that's what our folks are saying is fair, then why not change the bylaw? So the bylaw now reflects July 1. We've even had one case that came to the board that was approved to a kid turned 19 years and 364 days. Something about that age of 20, when you get to 20, nobody wants 20-year-olds participating with high school athletes. So, but they can participate until 19 years and 364 days. So that's the change in July 1. Doesn't say that you can't bring a kid to appeals that was born before July 1st. The likelihood of that kid can get a full year of eligibility should diminish now because by adding these 2 extra months. It also put the state of Florida about right in the middle. Before, when Coach Beasley can tell you too, when we used to go to our national conferences during the summer, people don't want to ever hear what happens in Florida because they consider Florida to be the most liberal state in the United States as far as our eligibility rules. We allow anybody to play. We allow homeschool kids to play, we allow kids to change schools left and right, and it don't matter. And you know, we're under state statute where all other states are not, so we hear that all the time. However, you know, we were the most stringent when it came to age. because September 1st was the date, and I think it was about 12 states that used September 1st. But the most lenient was Georgia. Georgia, you could turn it was the month of May. May 1st was the date for Georgia. As long as you didn't turn 19 before May 1st, you were able to participate. If you think about spring sports, that means you got a 20-year-old playing in your state championship events that year if a kid were to be in that situation. Policy 10.2.1 was a change where Mr. Harrison with adding and dropping sports as far as the district. A lot of times you're not sure if you're going to have enough kids to come out to form a team, so you don't choose to join a district, and then all of a sudden you got this influx of kids that come out and you want to be in a district. Well, as long as you do it now within the first 2 weeks for a $250 fee, you can do that. Policy 40.1.1.2, the video that some of you watched, I know football coaches, there's a lot of noise that came to the office, for lack of better terms, about that policy change. That was something that went through SMAC. We completely understand it didn't go through the proper channels with Football Advisory Committee because they were blindsided, didn't know anything about it, and a lot of other folks. And even the statute, the name of the statute, the policy was incorrect because the policy says it's shoulder tackling, blocking, and equipment. So that's what, when you get the red handbooks, you're going to see that in our red handbooks. When actually the week after we left the conference, the National Federation didn't even tell us about it. They changed the name of the course. We found out when one of our schools tried to log in to have their coaches watch the video, and the name that we told them of the video was not the name that was listed as a choice in the courses for National Federation. So now it is USA Football Tackling and Blocking is the name of the course. We are allowing folks to watch it all together. I know Dan Talbot from Polk County did a Zoom meeting, I think last week or the week before. There was 720 coaches that all logged in. He paid the $10 and everybody got to get their certification for free. I told Brian, if you guys want to do it as a county, he can do it through Zoom, let the district office pay the $10 and everybody log in and get credit for watching that video. Your students, and this is something that I added this year because we get phone calls all the time about who's my students and so forth. Your students are kids that are currently enrolled in your school or any non-traditional student who has registered intent to participate in a sport at your school. And again, those non-traditional kids are only yours for the sport that they registered their intent. So if it's a fall sport, once that fall sport's done with, they're not your kids anymore unless they register their intent to play a winter sport or a spring sport with your school. Because they have that ability to move around or do whatever. So those are what's considered your student. And again, it's eligible registered non-traditional students. Next page, bro.
What's a non-traditional student?
Non-traditional student, home education kid, kid that attends a charter school that doesn't offer the sport. Basically, a non-traditional student is a student that's not sitting in your class like a traditional student, not enrolled in your school. For example, home education kid, charter school student that attends a charter school that doesn't offer that sport, that want to play at your school. Could be a Florida virtual school, full-time Florida virtual school student, which means that it's not your district Florida virtual school, but or could be your district Florida virtual school. Florida virtual school flex could be a non-member private school. That's less than 125 students that does not offer that sport. Those kids have the opportunity to participate for their zone public school or the public school they could attend. And all those non-traditional kids, just so you're aware, they can, if it's a non-traditional student, they can participate at their zone public school regardless of capacity. Doesn't matter what capacity is like, if they're zoned for that school, they can participate. If it's not their zone school, they have to go through the controlled open enrollment process like they would be to attend that school. Even though they're not going to take up a seat, they still would go through that same process. And if there's a window of, for open enrollment, they must do it during that window just like any other student would do it, would go through the process. So those are the things with non-traditional, if I answer your question, Frank. Students that are not your students or middle school students, and we hear this all the time, and I coach sports for 20 years, and I'm used to, in Marion County, where we're from, there was North Marion Middle School that was on the west side of 441. The high school was probably 3/4 of a mile away, and then we had about 6 or 7 little elementary schools. And I considered at that time, because unless you signed up for a magnet program or you went to private school, 99% of our kids, 90% of our kids matriculated from the elementary schools to the middle schools to the high school. So I call those schools my feeder schools. We are in the state of Florida, and Florida is a very, very strong choice state as far as education is concerned now. So the term feeder school needs to be erased from your vocabulary, because there are no more feeder schools anymore. Because a kid now has a choice of going to, with open enrollment, any school in the state of Florida, regardless of where they live at, they can provide their own transportation. I can live in Miami and attend school in Okaloosa, Niceville, if I choose to, if I can provide my own transportation. And there's a seat available. Again, seat available is the key to that. So there's lots of changes with that. So please unprogram the feeder school system that, kids got to come here. No, they could choose a private school or another charter school, or go to control enrollment and attend another public school within your own school district. So unprogram yourself about those are my kids, because they're not your kids until they actually leave 8th grade and start doing summer workouts with you, and that's still not officially yours, because we determine residency based on where you either start fall practice or you attend school for the first time in the fall. That's where you establish residency for that school year, initial residency. Okay. Students who attend another school that live in or who have registered, because we had an issue this year where a kid that registered for the 2021 school year been at a public school, did all paperwork for the following school year, but was still at the previous school, and the kid practiced spring football at the new school the whole spring and played in the spring game. And it's like, how does that happen? Well, they just saw the paperwork and thought, well, okay, the kid is registered here, but the registration was for the 21-22 school year, not the 2021. So please, again, just because they've already been put all that paperwork in for the following year, until they finish the school that they're at, they're not your kids. And a lot of times that happens with our private schools, because they've been accepted and everything else, and they feel once they've been accepted, I can go ahead and talk to them. No, they got to finish where they're at first before you can have those conversations with them. But that's it about students that are not yours. You can change it, Brian. Some violations, again, with the transfer rule, in state statute, the 4 exceptions, we see a lot of people allowing kids that played at school A in the fall, play football at school A, to be able to participate in the spring game at school B without even looking at the 4 exceptions that are listed. Happens all the time. And we had one school down south that 2 years in a row, last year the coach said, I'm just going to pay the fine. Well, not last year, 2 years ago. I'm just going to pay the fine, and I don't care about the deal. So put it in writing. We said, okay, if that's what you feel. Instead of $100 for the self-report, we made it $2,500 per voucher for the 3 kids that paid. $7,500, they wrote a check for it, fine and dandy. This year, the coach left, but one of the assistant coaches was on there, same principal, same AD. They had 6 kids that did the same thing. So again, it's $2,500 fine. Actually, it was 8 kids. $2,500 fine ended up being like a $20,000 fine to the school, and because they did the same thing over again, not paying any attention to that. Improper contact, impermissible benefits, those are things that are still happening, and we're trying to be vigilant, but again, like I think was stated earlier, please tell us things. And I know a lot of times, you think that we don't do anything when we get an allegation. I'm going to treat the people that you're accusing just like I would treat you. If an allegation comes into you, I'm going to give you every opportunity to dispute that allegation, to provide your side of the story before we make a decision. And a lot of times, unless there's hard evidence, I'm probably going to side with not necessarily side, the evidence will lean more towards the school that's been accused that something possibly didn't happen. So sharing that process with you. And then EO2s and EO3s, that's $500 per each one of those, that if you allow a kid to participate. And that's state law. And not on top of that, but if a kid has a catastrophic injury and doesn't have a current EO2 or EO3, your school district's going to pay some mom and dad millions of dollars. Probably going to try to settle out of court to keep from it being billions of dollars or multiple millions of dollars. So please make sure all your kids' physicals are up to date in current EO2s and EO3s before you allow them to participate. Next slide, bro. And heard some talk about control of enrollment. Tim has some great questions about that. It is considered an impermissible benefit if a school is closed and, kids go through the process to get, because I'm not zoned for that school, go through the open enrollment process, and if athletes are being allowed into that school and non-athletes are being denied, that's an impermissible benefit. That's a recruiting violation, makes that kid ineligible for a year, and there'll be a $2,500 fine for that school. So I'm sharing that, so if you know some of those situations, or just so the district is aware that there needs to be consistency. So I think I heard that there's an appeal process for undue hardship if a kid gets denied, open enrollment because of the school's at capacity, and they go through that process. Well, if they go through that appeal process, well, it needs to be consistent. If I'm approving, athletes, then I also need to be approving regular students, band kids, kids that don't play a sport too. It should not just be athletes are the only ones that are getting approved through this due process system, because if so, that is a form of a impermissible benefit, which causes the kid to be ineligible for a year, and it also gets the school in trouble, with the fine. So I want to put that up there just so we always on the same page with that one. Next slide, Brian. And this is 100231, deals with control of enrollment, and I know that was a question that came up again. Our office has nothing to do with control of enrollment, and I apologize for it being super small, but just remember 100231, and it's a whole lot more with that. The district controls, puts in place protocols for control of enrollment. The district also has the ability to control capacity at a school. It's not anything they look at the fish plan, and they look at, I guess, based on numbers, and they can raise those numbers, lower those numbers, or anything, but those are things that are controlled by your school district. And a lot of times we get blamed for it, the association, and state statute completely took that completely away from us. We have nothing to do with control of enrollment. If someone called and asked, we'll ask what your control of enrollment process is, ask the district, and they provide that information to us, but that is controlled locally at your school district. And again, state statute gives the district school board the authority to create policies and procedures dealing with control of enrollment, and how the process of how it's advertised, how they reach capacity, all those things are controlled at the local level, and definitely our office has nothing to do with them. So I want to put that out there because I hear about it. Even with control of enrollment, I can't even hear an appeal on control of enrollment. So it don't even go to, somebody calls and say, hey, we want to appeal this because it was ruled ineligible by the district. My answer is no, we can't. I don't have the authority by state statute to overturn. When we had stuff in place that talked about, like, head and live with full and complete move, like we talked about earlier, those things could be appealed to us because it was in our bylaws and policies, but now that control of enrollment is there, we don't even have it in our bylaws and policies, so it is strictly up to a district and the district control. All right, and this is just for informational purposes, allegations, just so everybody understands allegations. And I put this on there because a lot of times folks think that we do nothing up in at least in my department, we don't do anything to help out. Allegations process, I talked about a little bit ago. If we get an allegation, I'm gonna send it to the school. I'm gonna send it to you exactly how I get it. So if they put names and stuff in there, we don't redact anything, you get it exactly the way we receive it. We give the schools an opportunity, 5 business days to provide a response, and based on that response that we get along with the allegation, our office takes some form of action. It may be no action at all at this point in time because there's not enough evidence. They may be asking for more additional questions because we need some clarification on some things, or maybe telling the school, okay, based on what you just sent in, it sounds like you need to do a self-report because there was a violation there. So those are 1 or 3 actions that take place also. Other question I get all the time, why you guys don't go out and do an investigation? Y'all need to go out and investigate the school. Well, per statute and per our bylaws and policies and procedures, in order to do an investigation, first thing I do is I have to call the principal of the school or send the principal of the school something in writing that says that, hey, I think there's impermissible benefits going to your school. I think that Craig Damon is going out and offering kids cars or whatever. When can I come to your school to do an investigation? So I'm sending you a notice out in writing that tells you, that's requesting an opportunity to come do an investigation. I'm telling you what I'm coming to look for, and you get the opportunity to tell me when to come. So based on what you tell me, then I send an investigator out, and unless you just can't walk and chew gum or you just falling all over, when I get there, you're going to have everything in place. And everything's going to be all lined up, and when I get there, all the ducks going to be in a row, and people are going to say the same answer, give the same, rehearsed response, and it's almost like a waste of time and a waste of resources. So I very seldom bring an investigator in unless I really know that there's something there, and if I can get the investigator to talk to parents and kids, or I know there's somebody there that will provide answers, which I'm going to tell you about a scenario of a school that I'm dealing with right now, trying to finish up on. Unless I know that I have somebody that's going to give me information, it's a waste of time to send an investigator in. I might as well just let you respond and tell me. I hope that you tell me the truth, because it's a waste of resources to do that. So that's why we don't. However, is the next slide a chart? Okay. This chart here, just imagine that went to your school. Okay, and that bottom number, if you can't see it, is $1,045,000 in fines that this one school that right now they're scrambling a little bit and trying to figure out what they're going to do. So back in September, and Coach Beasley was there, and he probably got some of those emails too. We started getting emails on this one school about their football program, their boys basketball team, and their baseball program, bringing in kids, hiring coaches, and providing transportation, kids living with the coach. The kids not paying tuition, the kids not paying for parking fees, kids getting to eat lunch for free every day in September. And about every 2 or 3 weeks, we get the same consistent email in as far as an allegation. And each time I send it to the head of school and the AD respond back, nope, the first email I got was a long 2.5-page response from the AD and from the head of school that, oh, no, we wouldn't do this. So I talked to all my coaches. There's no way that would happen. So October comes, we send another allegation, same exact allegation, because it came back into us that exact same way. Then the responses got a little bit shorter. Nope, we wouldn't do that. We looked into it thoroughly. So by the time we got to March, it was just all capital letters, no, this is ridiculous. Please stop sending us these deals. So I was like, okay. So in March, I reached out to the head of school and said, hey, maybe it's your parents, and your parents don't understand the rules. Can I come to your school and do a workshop? And just come and talk about the rules of the association so your parents understand that they are part of the school's athletic interests, and the school can be held accountable for their actions. I said, sure, come on. Like, well, why about inviting your coaches too? Let's have your coaches and parents get there. So show up the day of, I get there about 45 minutes before time for me to present, and they quickly bring me into the office. And I'm like, okay. And they close the door. I'm like, well, my superintendent is here. I'm like, why is your superintendent here? Well, we just have our superintendent here today. And the AD proceeded to tell me, well, I got this agenda set up where we got chairs on the stage, and me and you and the head of school, we'll sit there and we'll just have a little conversation, and the audience can hear our conversation. It's like, nah, that's not what I plan to do. I got a presentation. I got certain things I want to make sure I cover. And it's like, oh, well, but, then don't take no questions from anybody. It's like, why am I not going to take questions? Because if they ask a question, that means that they don't understand. And my job is to help educate them. So then it came out, well, there's some parents that are trying to get the head of school fired and me as AD fired, so we don't want them to ask you anything that, that you might fire. So I'm like, I can't fire you. You don't work for me. I don't hire and fire. And this ain't my first rodeo. I've been to and talked with parents before, and I know when they start talking about hiring and firing, I know how to say, look, that's not my wheelhouse. I know where my wheelhouse is at, and I can get back in my wheelhouse. So I'm up talking and talking about different things, impermissible benefits, about providing rides for kids and kids staying with coaches and staying with teammates and stuff. And usually when you get people nodding their head when they understand what you're talking about and going along with you, it was just these blank stares. And I'm like, dang, is it that bad? So I'm thinking all these people are parents. Like, okay, well, the parents don't understand. Well, it was like 4 parents in the audience that day. And so everybody, when I finish, I'm up there, I have business cards, I'm passing out business cards. And some of the parents come and get a business card from me. Well, my business card had my cell phone number on it. So Finished talking, the head of school, principal, like, hey, thank you for coming. I'm walking out. As I'm going to my truck, there's 3 parents standing by my truck waiting to talk to me. And they're like, listen, we got so much we can tell you, but we're afraid of our kids getting in trouble or retaliation happening against our kids. I'm like, well, text me, call me, if you want to put it in writing. And they started calling me. And they started telling me everything that was going on. So then at that point, talked to Mr. Thomas, my boss, like, we need to send an investigator in. But they gave me all the key names of people that would talk, would give me information. So I made sure he interviewed those people. And that's sort of where we're at now. 5 football players, 3 were fifth-year kids that they did not ask for an appeal for. 2 didn't have grades that played in 8 football games. There was 3 the basketball team. The year before, they were 2-22. Didn't have anybody over 6 foot tall on the basketball team. This year, they brought 9 new basketball players in. All the basketball players transferred in. Everybody was 6 foot or taller, and they were 24-3 and finished runner-up in the state. Lost the championship game by, I think, 5 points. The kids were being transported by the coach from 3 counties over every day. They were just carpooling together to get to this school. The baseball team, one of the assistant coaches was a travel ball coach. And his travel ball kids were just being farmed into the high school team. So you go back and look at social media way back in March when we were in the middle of the pandemic and everybody had shut down. 3 of the basketball players when the coach was hired on April 16th, April 17th, 2 of the best basketball players in the state of Florida announced on Twitter that they were transferring to this school. So everything shut down. How you gonna transfer when you can't, do a withdrawal paperwork from your own school that you're going to, or you can't even go to the new school to register because COVID had everything shut down. Nobody was on campus. So all these things go into place, and it was everything that was detailed in these allegations. So I tell you guys this as ADs or as coaches, if you get an allegation to your school, I'm a firm believer that, I have 2 kids that when my kids are with me, they will act like angels. But when they get with their friends and dad is not around, they would do what anybody else would do. Coaches, we're the same way too. If my principal's there, I'm gonna act a certain way. If my principal's not there, I'm probably gonna have a few more drinks and probably say a few more choice words than I normally would say. So when an allegation comes to you, please cooperate and look into it. Take your blinders off, take your school clothes off and look into it diligently, because if not, here's the school that was just loyal to their coaches and swore up and down their coaches wouldn't do anything. And now they're looking at a possible $1,045,000 fine. We're not going to fine them that much because we're not about money like that, but that's what it could have been. And that's not even including, when I looked at their financial documents, they have scholarships that on their website says it's supposed to be for a maximum of $1,000, where athletes got $2,000 instead of $1,000. They had this one foundation where a family donated $40,000 to the school each year, and whoever the person represented the family got to come in. The school would just tell them, okay, here's the 8 kids we want you to interview. He would interview the kids and he would give them money. Of these 7 kids, they interviewed 6 for athletes. So all those type things that I could have added on top of that, and it could have probably reached $2 million, but the point was already made that they had lots of violations. So that's the school that at some point in time, the board of directors or Mr. Thomas is going to have to make a decision, well, we can let them continue to be a member or not, because it was that bad. And, and they're trying to stall now to get time, because if it hits the news media like it's going to hit the news media, because we've already got like 10 public records requests from all the local media folks, they're worried about student enrollment because it's a private school and tuition is being paid. And people withdrawing their kids from school. So they're trying to stall as long as they can to get the school year started, so they can at least say, hey, you signed a contract and you owe us the money whether you come to school here or not. But wanted to put that slide up because, again, tunnel vision and saying that my coaches or that would never happen at my school, it might happen at your school. So don't ever say it won't happen, because it could be $1,045,000 fine on the other end of that. And I think it should be about it, Brian, right? Yep, questions. Any questions that have not already been asked, or anything that I did not address? I tried to added like 4 or 5 slides last night based on conversations I was having during dinner of things that I knew were issues. Coach Beasley. And that goes back to state statute. State statute says if a kid plays a sport at a school during the school year and then transfers to another school and wants to continue playing that same sport during the same school year, they must meet one of 4 state exceptions. One of the exceptions is the parents are active military duty personnel that get a change of orders which causes them to have to move to another location. Those kids are automatically eligible. The second one is if a kid is part of a foster care system and they get a change in foster care placement, which causes them to have to move. Those kids are immediately eligible. Third one is changing custody through the court system of a custodial parent due to separation or divorce, serious illness, or death of the custodial parents. Those kids are eligible. And the fourth one is that one that we all sort of don't like because it's good cause of the school district. So it would be depend on the good cause policy of Okaloosa County, which could or may not allow that kid to continue participating. And I don't like that one because there's 67 counties in our state. All 67 counties have, school districts have something different. Then you get thrown in another probably 100 and some charter schools that have something different. And then there's about 200 private schools that, some of those private schools, as long as you sign your name on the paper, you can play. So. The moves that are listed in state statute is because of military, because of foster care placement, or because of court order changing custody, not just a move. So it move with one of those 3 things, or if the district's good cause policy included a move that wasn't listed. So it'd have to be in the good cause policy of the school district.
So with this hypothetical volleyball player, though, Coach, they could move in the summer. Like if they were with you in the summer and they moved before Monday, Monday starts the calendar. So anything that happens prior to Monday, that student was not yours.
All right, no other questions. Again, thank you guys. Love the opportunity to come to Okaloosa County to get to hang out with you guys and eat that smoked prime rib. That's the best. But again, if you think of anything, I think my last screen has my cell phone number and email address on there. Call me, email me, and be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Craig. And while he's putting his stuff together and getting out, I'll just share a conversation that we've had, and is that, you know, as a coach, and especially if you're an older coach, and you've been coaching many decades, you may get frustrated with some rules, and you may not agree with some rules. And we always run into coaches that you may not like the rule, but if it's written in statute and it's an FHSA policy, it's good to learn the rules. And some of our best coaches in our county, they know all the rules. And then knowing the rules helps you work within the rules. And if you see other coaches working within the rules and you don't like it, well, if they're within the rules, it's okay. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And I always run into coaches that, because they don't like the rules, they just don't even move within it. They don't take the time and effort to realize what their options are within the rules. So what I'd say is when the new handbook comes out, when the new handbook comes out in a month or a week, get familiar with it. Go through it. Look at the changes. I think all the changes are highlighted in gray. And every year there's going to be changes. Whether you like them or not, it's our job to learn the rules and learn to act within the rules.
And the new handbooks are out. Just if you get a handbook, I know there's a couple that's sent to the school, some things to help you with. The changes are always highlighted in gray. And just to show you a couple things, on the right-hand side of each page, it has like the bylaw number on there. If you see, like this page, you see the gray bar on that edge of the page, that means there's a change on that page. So if you're looking for changes, just want to thumb through and find changes, look for the little gray bar on the side of the right-hand side of the page, or on the edge of the page, and that lets you know where the changes are.
As a coach, your best resource to getting your hands on this and getting a manual to look through is your athletic director. But to that point, every coach in here, while you're at your school, you may not know every rule. Like Mr. Damon here is just citing them off because he's been doing it many, many years. And even our school board policies, if you're not familiar with it, your best resource as a coach is to go to your athletic director. Every athletic director we have at all of our high schools are very experienced. They will give you the answer immediately. So that's your best resource.
To me, what I would do is upload it to your desktop as a coach, and that way you can click on it and have it available anytime you need it. But it should be, if it's not, it should be on the website.
Thank you, Craig. Yeah, drive safe. All right, thanks, Craig. So back to the athletic director thing. So coaches, if you've got questions, issues you're preparing for your season, there's things that you need to do to prepare for your seasons. Questions can come up. Your athletic director is your number one call. Get with them every year, at least once. I'm hoping y'all have coaches meetings on campus to where you get coaches together and fill them in. Because whenever there is an incident at a school, it doesn't happen often, but whenever there is, and we get into the school and we bring up the incident to the coach will always say they didn't know any better. And there's probably some truth to that. So not knowing doesn't always get you out. We all should know our jobs. We all should know our responsibilities. So your athletic director is your number one source. You're always welcome to email me or call. I'll try to answer best I can. Email would probably work best. And so my office is an office in the district called Student Services, and Student Services works with athletics. So we're a good resource. The lady who just helped us with Chapter 4, I don't know if everyone in here knows her, but she's our director over Student Services, Miss Tracy Lamb. You can wave to everybody, Tracy. And Tracy is going to be a great resource for all of you coaches. So if you need something like managerial stuff, you can't just call and ask for money, because that's yeah, right. But if you need something done managerial on your campus, she's going to be a great resource, and she's going to try to back every athletic program at every school. So just know that we're here working to try to help you, but the responsibility inevitably falls on you you have to know your job responsibilities and how to conduct those. All right, how many people in here coach a fall sport? Fall sport. All right. So in the fall we've got football, volleyball, cross country, golf. Okay. So at the beginning of every season, you're going to start getting your stuff together and advertise tryouts. You're going to start preparing to get students in. You've got to get athletic packets in. But the very first thing you could have already done ahead of time, once your schedule's made, is it's a requirement. And it's not anything that's new. It's been around for at least 100 years. Is every coach is supposed to fill out TDE and trip requests. So the reason that every coach does not always fill out trip requests and TDE forms is because if you don't do it, we don't have somebody checking behind you. All right, but the purpose for the TDE and trip requests, it's related to insurance. So if you're working at your school, you're covered. But if you leave your school and go to Escambia County, you need a form that says temporary duty elsewhere. So you should fill out a form that allows you to leave your school and take your kids somewhere else. So what you can do so there's a TDE form and a trip request form. And it's all through PAWS. You're not allowed to fill it out on paper anymore. So raise your hand if you've done your TDE and trip request for the fall. All right. And I know this because we have a binder and a folder that we keep all TDE and trip requests in, and it's empty. So we always hope that we always hope nothing bad's going to happen, but we always have to prepare just in case something bad does happen. If something was to happen to you while you were off campus, you would be covered because you have a TDE form. And you have permission to go to off your campus and go to Pensacola or go to Panama City or Tallahassee or Tampa. So Every coach before their season should log into pause, and that's what the pause screen looks like, and it's small, but there's a drop down, and you would change the drop down thing to TDE, temporary duty, and you would fill it out. If you have your sports season schedule, you would attach it to the student trip request, and you don't have to fill out another one. You just fill out the student trip request and attach the schedule. Same with your TDE. So it would only take you 5 or 10 minutes to fill out your TDE and trip request for your entire season. So every coach, as soon as you get your schedule, you should get on pause, fill out your TDE, fill out your trip request, and that gives you permissions to go and take students somewhere. Without it, if something bad did happen, which we hope never happens, but if something bad did happen, you would be covered, but if you don't have it, you would not necessarily be covered, and your students would not be covered because you've not gotten proper permissions to take those students on a school bus out of the area. So student trip requests and TDEs, we should do a better job at it. But like I said, nobody checks on you, but what should happen is we should check ourselves and make sure that we have that done. It's for your benefit and your students' benefit. Okay? All right. So in the folder that Ms. Manchester put together, there's some handouts. This is a handout. It's an MIS document. That means you can find it online if you need it. This is a picture of the top of it, and it's a form that outlines finances for the year. So one of the most popular questions or calls that I get from parents are parents whenever someone makes the team, if you send out a letter that has anything to do with the parent has to pay money, that's an automatic call to the superintendent's office. And I'm going to tell you, we do not have a policy or procedure or even a practice where we're making everyone in our public school system pay to be on your team. It's not a pay to play. It's not like travel ball. So I agree with every coach. There is a cost for every player on your team because your season costs money. Your program costs money. Some of our programs, our coaches have done such a good job to elevate the program to where they have like 2 or 3 playoff games every year. That costs money. Then they take teams to camps all the time, and that costs money. They don't do the bare minimum. If you do the bare minimum, your budget is small. But we have very few programs in our schools that do the bare minimum. In fact, we have more coaches that lean towards pushing it. We have coaches, if we let them play 40, 50 games, they'd play them. So all that has a cost. We don't want to deter that cost. But as a coach, you need to plan ahead. You need to let your players know that there is a cost associated, and then they all can take a portion of that cost, but you have to give them the opportunity to fundraise. So it's okay to tell somebody that, look, you need to go, we're having 4 fundraisers for our soccer team. It's mandatory, you have to participate in 2 of them. And give them some flexibility. We offer 4 of them. Like one can be, we're selling cookies, the other, we're selling wrapping paper, the other one could be a car wash. You give them 4 choices. Then tell them pick 2. And then from that, you can mark down their debt. And like, let's say every kid owed $100. There'll be parents that'll say, I don't want to participate in that. Let me just write you a check. And you go, okay, you can write a check and you don't have to do any of the fundraising. But we have to give them a choice. So every year we've mentioned this when we had this coaches thing, and every year I still get these calls, and I always say, so ma'am, I'll say, well, can you email me that letter? And they'll scan and email me the letter, and the letter will say, congratulations, your son just made the soccer team. Now you need to make a check payable for $350, and it's due by, and then you look at the due date, and I'll be like, that's next week. So you can't hit them with that and them not be shocked. So I'm sharing with you that doesn't need to be our practice. Our practice needs to be plan ahead, figure out how much it costs to run your season, schedule some fundraising events, make it to where they have an option, And if a kid doesn't, then you can make him accountable for an amount of money, okay? The best practice for handling this is always have a parent meeting at the beginning of the season. And everybody should get in the habit of a parent meeting. And I know when I coached, I didn't have parent meetings all the time. And I've spoken to coaches, they don't want to talk to their parents, but I'm telling you, the best thing you could do is have a parent meeting and go over this with parents, because parents don't realize, most parents don't realize the work that you do. You know, they think you just show up and coach the game. They don't realize you're doing all these fundraising things, and we've got coaches going out and getting bus training so they can save money, and they don't realize that you're doing laundry and you're paying for the laundry detergent out of your pocket. And, you know, they don't understand that there's a cost. They think that the school district pays. So you can have a parent meeting and go over a form like this that outlines what your program costs, and you can stand up there and go, look, the school district doesn't give us any of this money. It's okay to say that, because we don't. The school district gives everybody in here $0 for their program. You only get a supplement. That's it. So you can share that. There's no secret there. So a parent meeting is the first step to transparency, and it's a good idea to be up front, and then look, you make sure you're getting enough money to run your program, okay? So on eligibility forms, our athletic packet, I think it's up to 10 or 11 pages. There's a link on the high school or on the school district website. You go to departments, go to athletics, and that's the page. And it says high school athletic packet. That packet is updated. So there's been a update to the EL3 form from FHSAA, and it includes a sentence that gives permissions for the athletic trainer to take care of your student athlete. All right, it's just one sentence, but it's a change. If you don't have the EL3 updated, you need to make sure you have it updated. The best practice here is your website, your school website, should link to that link. That way, every time I update the packet, your packet gets updated. So I don't know how you're doing it at your school, but just make sure if someone was to Google your school website, if there's a link there, make sure it's an updated link, okay? Now, this update came out early or late June, early July. So if you have anybody who filled out an athletic packet prior to that, and they're planning on using it for the next school year, because, you know, it's good for 365 days, they can still use that old packet, but they have to have an addendum page. The addendum page is in your packet. I also emailed it out electronically to athletic directors either late June, early July. I'll email it out again when I get those school board policy numbers, and I send them out and share with everybody. But you can, a student who filled out their eligibility packet prior to July, that packet's still good, you got to have them have an addendum. If they're just now filling out a packet and they have the updated one, they don't need the addendum. Just make sure they have the updated EL3 packet, okay? So on these forms, too many times throughout the year we run into a student who does not have athletic paperwork. And we would think that would not happen, but it does, and I still shake my head. Every kid has to have a physical in order to try out. A kid cannot come to you and try out with no physical. That's not an option. And I shouldn't even be saying that a kid shouldn't participate in games without a physical, because that's way after the tryout. It should never happen. And the only time it's ever brought to our attention is when a kid goes down and he's injured. If he's injured, we always try to visit the family, call the family, talk to the family. We ask. And then we always try to make sure we have our ducks covered on the school district side so that we don't get a lawsuit. And so when a kid goes down and he's injured, we look and come to find out the school doesn't have the paperwork. And that should never happen. And I can't say that enough, but just make sure No one can try out without a physical and an EL3, okay? And then on eligibility forms, at your school, there needs to be a process for how you handle these packets, these student packets, all right? If you've got a crummy process, that's why you don't have forms. That's why you're either losing forms or kids don't have the form or the coach didn't know that, or the coach will say, I didn't know he didn't have a physical. I thought since he played football he had a physical. And you know, later on in the year they just assume they don't have it. So you need to have a process at your school. And I'll share two good ones that I know that we do in this county, and there may be others, but I know of one school where the coach has in his office a filing cabinet. It's a tall filing cabinet. It's got the big drawers. One drawer's for like the boys, and one drawer's for the girls. He's got them separated. And right next to it's a copy machine. And the rule is all the coaches know they can go in the office and pull out the kid's packet, but they're not allowed to take the packet out of the office. There's a copy machine right there. You take it and put it on the copy machine, make a copy, and then put it back. It should never leave, because what would happen if it leaves? The next guy's not going to get it. It'll be gone by then. So that process works at that school. Those coaches are trained and they do that, and that's wonderful. I'll show you another school. They have a process where if the student or the parent brings the packet and they bring it up to the front office, the coaches don't take them. They bring them up to the front office. And if the kid hands the packet over and he's missing some pages, the lady goes, no, you take that back. We don't take partial packets. If you take partial packets, you're asking for trouble. How are you going to keep up with, well, he had the EL3, but he didn't have the EL2, but then the concussion form only was half done. How are you going to keep up with that? It needs to be an entire packet. The lady takes it and she says, hold on a minute, don't go anywhere. And she thumbs through it to make sure it's all there. And then there's a form that has to be notarized. That notarization has to be on there. She looks through it. If they're good to go, she says, hold on, don't move. She goes and photocopies it or scans it and gives them a copy of the packet and says, all right, now you can take that home. That way the person at home has a copy in case we were to lose something. That's a great practice to do. And then she keeps a filing cabinet of all of the students on campus, and those papers don't go anywhere. They're locked up because if you pass them around, they're going to get lost. They're going to get ripped, torn. Someone's going to spill coffee on them, throw them out, and they're not going to make it through the year. So at your school, have a process. If you're losing stuff or you're the guy that's coaching spring sports and by the time spring gets here they've lost the forms, well then you need to start arguing and go, look guys, we need to make a better process because you guys in the fall had we should never lose paperwork. We should always have it on file. You should always know where to get it, and it should be a complete packet. In the athletic packet, there's a concussion form. So the concussion is not a statutory requirement, but our county requires it. We started requiring it years ago. There was a group of doctors in our county that really pushed for it, and so we added concussion baseline testing. So concussion baseline testing, we're only providing it for the student athletes that make your team. You do not have to do concussion baseline testing for the students that try out. Because at some of our schools, you may have 80 kids try out or 100 kids. We're not baseline testing all of those. Now, they all have to have a physical, but they all don't have to be baseline tested. Once you make your team and you cut 70 of those kids and now you have your team, you take your team into a computer lab and give them the baseline test if it's required. Now, a couple of years back, the Andrews Institute, they started their own concussion baseline testing and they offer it to our district for free. But they have to administer it with their athletic trainers. So for those that have been around a while, you've seen it. They do it in the month of June. They did it last June. We concussion baseline tested At some schools, 150 to 200. We've had some middle schools that baseline tested through the Andrews Institute over 100. So we've got a lot of kids concussion baseline tested in June. If that's the case, that they baseline tested through them, they don't have to do the impact. They have to do one or the other if the parent chooses. So in every athletic packet, you should have this form. It's an MIS form, and that's only a photo of the top of it. You know, the form keeps going. At the bottom of the form, there's a yes and a no. You have to at least offer it to the family. The parents can mark no. I've only seen 3 or 4 parents in my lifetime mark no. Most of them mark yes. And if they mark yes, now the responsibility is on the coach that we need to make sure we're doing baseline testing. All right. So as a coach, your question is going to be, first off, did they do the one through the Andrews Institute? All right. If they did, they're already good. They don't need to do the other one. So how you're going to find that out is go to the athletic trainer, because she's keeping it on her tablet. So if you find out who your athletic trainer is, go to them and say, hey, can you check these kids for me? These kids made my team, these 8 right here, and say, tell me how many of those baseline tested in June with you. And if she says all 8 of them did, then you're good. But if you have anyone who missed the June window and they're not on her list, then she's not responsible for impact testing. Now, she could do it for you if you asked her and they would agree to, but it falls back onto the coach, to where the coach needs to now take any kid who has not been baseline tested and the parent marked yes on that form. You need to take them into the computer lab and give them their baseline test. Okay? It's a little confusing because we have 2 options. It was less confusion when there was one, but the second option that the Andrews Institute has given, it's a better option. It's just they only offer it that one day. And we hate to miss out on it because it is a really good option for a baseline test. It just takes a little bit more time than the impact one. All right. So Mr. Damon was talking about that blocking and tackling course that football coaches have to take. This is the website. I just took a photo of it. It's the National Federation of High School Sports.org, and it's like /learn or something. But if you Google National Federation of High School Sports Courses, it'll bring you to this website, and that's what the website looks like. And then from that, you would just scroll down and find the courses. So these are the courses that are required. All right, for players, all players have to have the heat illness prevention course. All players have to have the sudden cardiac arrest course, and all players have to have the concussion course. Each one of those courses you need to estimate is going to take 20 to 25 minutes, unless you have technical difficulties like a computer not working or something like that. But if everything goes smooth, that's how long it should take you to get through the course. Again, once you make your team, you don't have to do this for tryouts, because at tryouts you're going to have a large number of people coming out and try out for your team. But once you make your team, you can take your team into a computer lab and set it up. There's a login code that every school has. If the athletic director doesn't have theirs, it hadn't changed from last year. If you don't have it, I'll email it to you. Then everyone puts in that same code. And then it'll open up the test, and that student will have to put in a little personal information, and then the questions and the course will start. So every student's taking the heat illness, every student's taking sudden cardiac and concussion. You can put them all in a room, and they can all do it at the same time. You can put it in a room and show it that you can do it that way. Or they can go home and do it individually. That would just take longer and more work on you. If they do it as a group, where we show it up on the thing like this, you can print out a certificate and have them all sign the back, and then that's their sign-in for it. That certificate, or all of these certificates, needs to be on file in the front office somewhere. So if somebody ever had to come and ask for it, that's what they would ask, and you should be able to go straight to it. Now for coaches, those are the 4 that they have to take. The first, the heat illness, sudden cardiac arrest, and concussion have to be done annually. So it's every year. Even if you did it last year, you have to do it again. You can account for about 20 minutes for each one of these courses. So you can put them in your classroom and hit play and watch them and participate. You can also do these as a group, but every coach also needs to have a certificate printed out, and it should be in the front office on file that they've completed this obligation. Now, for the football coaches, this was added last year, but we never met because of COVID. So this was brought up, and like Mr. Damon said, the name has changed, so it's gone through some changes, but right now it's only a requirement every 4 years. So if any coach does it this year, you won't have to do it again until after 4 years. And that can also be done as a group. The only one that costs money is the blocking and tackling course. And so we'll try to put something out to where we maybe, like Mr. Damon said, Zoom it as a group, and so that the district would pay the $10, and maybe we can invite all of the football coaches. But we'll send something out in the next few days. So it's a requirement now that all supplemented coaches are CPR AED certified. That's good for 2 years. That certificate needs to be on file in the front office somewhere at your school as well. So all of those courses certifications have to be on file, and this also has to be on file. And if you get certified, it needs to be CPR and AED. We will offer CPR AED certification every summer as a school district through the Andrews Institute, and they'll be here in a little while, and they'll be able to discuss a little more detail on that. But they'll offer it, but they can also offer it throughout the school year. It's possible that they could put together a CPR AED. They just did another one last week, but they could put one together in August and September if there are coaches that need it. But the difficulty there is they have to bring a certified trainer over, because you have to be a CPR certified trainer, and that person has a limit of 7 students. So if we had a group of 14 coaches that needed it, we'd have to bring 2 trainers. So when we schedule something like that, it's important that you respond if you can be in it, because it has to be planned out. You just can't show up, because they need to know how many trainers to bring. But they can schedule some throughout the year, and they said that they will. This is something that came out a couple of years ago as the Emergency Action Plan. All of our high schools have an athletic trainer on campus, and they have kind of taken this emergency action plan away from coaches, and they kind of just handle it. Like all of our athletic trainers at the high schools are wonderful. So there's things that are outlined in an emergency action plan that every high school has to be doing. It's a requirement. We started doing it about 3 years ago, and that's like the cooling tub, the pool. And so there should be water and ice available, and there should be a cooling station. All that we've been doing for a couple of years. Well, now, as of last summer, the Zach Martin Act became a law, and that has now made it a requirement. And we've been doing it anyway, so we don't need to really change what we've done. Just realize that the significance that your athletic trainer is doing to help you on campus. And I know the athletic trainer on your campus, their priority is going to be football, because football is a collision sport. There's just a lot more opportunity, and they have gear on, and it's in the summertime, and it's extremely hot. So that's where their focus is going to be on. But coming this fall when school starts, the 2 sports that makes everyone nervous because of the heat is going to be football and then cross country. So when the school year starts, if you're coaching cross country or football, just make sure that you are aware of your responsibilities on having a cooling station, making sure that students are hydrated, making sure that we are meeting all the heat illness protocols. Because cross country and football are the top 2 sports where someone goes down with a heat-related illness, okay? This emergency action plan, it's required that every school have a written plan on how they handle emergencies. And there's one in your packet. This is a sample, and it says MEGS at the top. We put these together about 3 or 4 years ago, okay? And they should be updated. They should have a list of names like the athletic director and phone number. If there's been any changes on your campus for contact numbers or where AED is located, all that should be in the emergency action plan. It should be written down, and it should be sport specific. So there should be an emergency action plan, that a page for baseball, there should be one for soccer, there should be one for tennis, track. Every sport should have a page written out with contact information for severe emergencies, like someone's going down and they're not responsive. So when the Andrews Institute gets here and they're going over what a emergency action plan is, all of our coaches should be aware. You should be able to nod and go, I know what an emergency action plan is, because we have a written plan, and you don't have to have it memorized, but you should know where it's at, and you should know that in case of an emergency, obviously we call 911, and then we revert to our emergency action plan. So if a student was to go down and we did have an injury, and the Andrews Institute will touch on this, so I don't want to get all in the details, but if someone was to ask, we all need to know that we do have a written emergency action plan. You should not act like, well, I don't know what that is. And then if someone says, well, where's the AED? Every coach in here should know where your AED at your school's at. You should have more than one AED. And so the worst thing that we could do as a coach is have somebody go down and there be an emergency, and your response to an AED or something that is life-saving is that you didn't know nothing about it. Because that's the worst response you could possibly get. So at your school, there should be a brief meeting of coaches, and I don't know how you'd handle it. It's going to be up to the athletic directors, but there should be some sort of meeting where your coaches get together and discuss where the AED's at and make sure everyone has access to the AED. So if your AED's in the library and it's locked and your games are in the evening, that's the worst scenario we could possibly have, unless you got a key to the library. So there needs to be discussions to where everyone on campus has access to it, and everyone knows where it's at. This was up here. I didn't know Craig was going to talk about controlled open enrollment. We was going to pass this, but I will get something out to everybody about controlled open enrollment and what the board policy is on that. All right. So for semester eligibility, every time a semester starts, the eligibility changes on the 6th day for a student athlete. This always comes up in January because of basketball and soccer players, is because in January it splits a semester and it splits a season. So if you're in basketball season, a student could be eligible the first half, but once the semester grades come out, that student could become eligible or ineligible. But that doesn't officially happen till the 6th day of school. So if you have an athlete and he's ineligible for basketball and soccer, you start basketball and soccer season, you go through November and December, and he's ineligible, but in January when the semester changes, his GPA is going to bump above 2.0, he becomes eligible. You still can't play him until the 6th day of the second semester. And the reasoning for that is those 6 days are built in so that the student's academics can catch up. Like transcripts could come in and the kid could do makeup work. So just make sure that you don't play a kid on the 4th day, even though you know he became eligible. Everybody needs to know it's the 6th day it becomes official. All right, so for volunteers, many of our athletic programs, we have volunteers that come out and help us coach, Volunteers are good. We want to encourage volunteers. They're wonderful. What makes a volunteer is they're not a supplemented position. Supplemented positions are people who are paid by the district. A volunteer is not supplemented. They're not getting paid. Unless, you work something out through your sports program, but that's still a volunteer. All right, all volunteers by law have to register, all of them. And then when they register, they will register through our community affairs office by statute. They can't just come out and help you. That's not an option. They have to register, and they're going to register with community affairs. I put the phone number up there. And they're either going to be a level 1 volunteer or a level 2 volunteer. And the difference is a level 1 volunteer, they don't have to be fingerprinted, but they do have to be registered. So a level 1 will just fill out some paperwork and they're good, but they just have to be documented that they are who they say they are, and they have to go through this Raptor thing to be registered. A level 1 volunteer will never be left alone with kids, and they'll never go on overnight trips. Because if they're left alone with students to run a drill all by themselves with no supervision, that would make them a level 2. So anyone who you're going to trust to be with students where you as the coach are going to walk away and leave him with kids, he has to go through the level 2 volunteer screening. The level 2 volunteer screening, it requires fingerprinting, but the district will pay for the fingerprinting. It's not going to be a cost. So you'd run all that through community affairs. So if you have a volunteer or someone's talking about volunteering at a program at your school, you're going to direct them to register. We will not ever direct someone to just come out and help us. And that's against statute. So just make sure that that's not happening. All right, so for sportsmanship, there's 3 types of sportsmanship when people talk. Is the fans, which we can't really control fans, but we are responsible for our fans. So by that we kind of lean that on our district administration, our school administration. And then there's the athlete sportsmanship. All in all, if I was to grade our sportsmanship in Okaloosa County among athletes, it's an A+. I mean, we've got good kids. We do have kids every year that get penalties from FHSA, like Mr. Damon was saying, or they get turned in because of some unsportsmanlike conduct. But, the kids will be kids, and that's going to happen. It's your job to address that with the athlete. So they may lose their cool, and they may punch another kid on the field, and then it's up to you to reprimand them, and then we move on. It's kind of, we don't like it, but it's expected because emotions are high. So I've seen scenarios where we worked with a kid last fall that it was soccer. The couple of kids were running, and this kid pushed the other kid and said some words to him. So that kid turned around and punched the other kid in the face. And they admitted to it, so the kid sits out a game. There was a little bit of penalty, but we self-reported it, and so the fine was lower. And so the message to the kid was, what could you have done better? Could you not have responded that way? Just because somebody calls you a name, do you have to turn around and punch them? And we've all had that talk with players, is that maybe you over-responded. Kind of calm down a little bit because we needed you in the game, and now you've got to sit out 2 games. So that's the conversation that we have with players when they cross the line on sportsmanship. But the one I want to emphasize here is the sportsmanship for coaches. We're pretty good. We don't have a lot of coaches that get penalties. We don't have a lot of coaches that get kicked out. But every year we seem to have a few. And so my message to coaches would be, and I go to games 3 or 4 times a week. I've been waiting for football season for months now. And I've already got planned out all the football games I'm going to in the first couple of weeks. But so I love to go to high school sports. I've been to almost every school's games. Every month I try to get out somewhere. But I've seen where there's coaches that when the referee's not doing exactly what the coach wants, the coach is about to have a coronary, which I've been there. So sometimes it is frustrating. But just like with the player, you would hope that the player would vent for a second and then let it go. And then so for a coach, you can vent to the umpire, and you should vent to the umpire, because the umpires, the quality of umpires, we've all watched that drop off, and so they may need a little guidance. So it's good for you to nudge them and tell them to keep them focused. You should say things like, "Hey, where was that pitch at? Oh, a little outside. Okay." You should always be talking about the sport, or like if it's football and they call a holding, you can ask who's it on. That's a fair question to ask the umpire. But we should never go after them just screaming and yelling how stupid they are. And if you do that for a minute, we'll all just look the other way. It's okay. But I've been to games where the coach is doing it, and 30 minutes later, he's still doing it. And so my message is, just for the sportsmanship, is let's not go on a 30-minute tirade on how stupid the referee is. Give them what they need to get, and then let's move on and get back to coaching. Because just like we would want our players to let it go and move on, we would want our coaches to do the same, because there's fewer and fewer referees and umpires in all sports. It's just not something that people are signing up to do. And it's hard to get the younger generation to come out. So I know that in some sports, we're actually, for those of you who have scheduled fall sports for football, even the Football Association, they're short officials. There's no reason just to go out and just yell at them for 30 straight minutes if they miss a call. Yell at them a little bit and let's move on, okay? And then the last part of this is self-reporting. Is, anytime a school, if somebody has an allegation, like let's say Coach Hatton he wants to report something, if y'all will let me know, we are looking into every allegation that comes up if you see something. And I'll share with you that I don't have to go around and look. Every one of you that coach for a school, if you'll wear your school colors, there's another school that's watching you. I just have to wait and hear from them. So just know that we all want to follow the rules. If you see somebody not following the rules, if you'll report to me, every time it's reported to me, we look into it. But we can only act on what you can prove and what's factual. It's not hearsay. But what we would do is we would always extend the professional courtesy to every coach. Let them look into it first. Don't call FHSAA and go straight to the punishment part. Let's give that coach an opportunity. Now, once that coach looks into it, most likely it's not near as bad as what it was reported to be. And most likely they'll take care of it, and then we'll just leave it at that. But we would always want to give the opportunity to, if you know of something that's bothering you that another school's doing, then call me. Then we'll pass that information on. But we never sweep it under the rug. That's not an option. We'll always look into it. But it's got to be viable and factual, okay? And sometimes coaches will call me and say, "Brian, this coach did this, this, and this." And I say, "Oh, okay, well, let me call him." They'll go, "Hold on now, don't say my name." Well, I mean, either they did something and we need to address it, or we don't need to. And it's not disrespectful. It's we all want to follow the rules. And most of the time that I've called another coach, that coach wasn't even aware. I mean, you think about it. Some of y'all's programs are so big, you can't be on top of everything. It's not possible. So if you've got something to report it. There's no sweeping under the rug. We'll look into it. We'll prove what we can prove, and then we move on. But we're always going to extend the courtesy to the other coach to let them address it first. And that goes for any school. Okay? Transportation, we're going to have Mr. McGinnis come in, who's over the director over transportation. He'll talk about getting buses and transporting kids. But real quick, for a coach, and this is going to happen to every one of you, you're going to go off on a trip like to Pensacola or to Panama City, and you're going to have an athlete that is not going to want to get on the bus to come back with you because they're going to ride, like little Johnny's going to ride with Steve's parents. Like they're going to come and ask, hey, I need to ride with Steve's parents, and not get on the bus, okay? I'm saying as a coach, that's not in your purview, is who rides with who. Every kid that leaves with you should get on the bus and ride back with you. That's your go-to, all right? But in some cases, little Steve's parents are in Canada and he's spending the week with Johnny. If that's happening, that's still not in your purview. So this is your answer to every one of your athletes. If you're not riding the bus with me there and not riding the bus back with me, your parents need to call our principal or someone in the front office, and y'all need to get that straightened away before we leave on the trip. So if I'm taking my team to Pensacola and Johnny wants to ride with Steve and we're leaving on Friday, before Friday, their parents need to call my principal, because your principal has access to a computer screen that shows who has pickup rights and parental rights and the enrolling parent. You don't have all that. And so if they will work it out before we leave on Friday, and your principal comes to you and says, hey, little Johnny can ride with Steve, I already got that worked out, then you can let that happen. But in no shape, form, or fashion should you be loading your bus and Johnny and Steve come running up to you and go, hey, coach, we need to talk to you for a minute. And then they ask you, because that's putting you on the spot. You can't give them permission, because you're responsible for getting that student to the event on that bus and then back on that bus. And then they can pick them up at the school. So I'm positive that every coach in here, if you've coached a full season, you're going to be asked that question, and you let them know that you're not the keeper of that. They have to go through the office to make that happen. So don't ever answer yes or no. Don't go, oh, that's fine. Even if their parents come to you, you go, hold on a minute, because not every set of parent has the same parental rights. You know, some of them families are separated, some people have the right, some don't have it. So all that needs to be looked into before. So even if the parents come up to you and go, hey, it's okay with us, you go, no, you got to go through the office, and once an administrator at my school tells me it's okay, then I'll let that happen, okay? But for you, this is easy. You don't answer that question. You defer them to your school administrator, okay? The Andrews Institute's here, and they're going to go over, injury prevention, some emergency action plan stuff. It's real important.
Good morning, everybody. See that you are appropriately physically distancing from us, so we're going to go without a mask here, but little joke for everybody sitting in the back. But my name is Kathleen McGraw. I'm the Sports Medicine Outreach Manager at Andrews Institute. I've gotten to speak with many of you before, and really appreciate the opportunity to come back with myself and our team here, many of whom you know, and you'll see them here again as well. But I don't make it over to this county as much as I want to, but definitely looking forward to getting back out in the field a little bit more post-COVID. So again, we appreciate the opportunity to get with you guys and review some of these important pieces. I know this is not just the most fun set of topics to always be talking about. I know you guys are just there because you love coaching, love your student athletes, and I'm going to give you my take-home point at the beginning to say that bad injuries, catastrophic injuries can and will happen. Hopefully they don't, hopefully not to anyone in this room, but they can and they do in athletics. So what really makes the difference for the student athletes, their families, our healthcare team, you guys included in that, is how we respond to those injuries and how prepared we are to manage them should they occur. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go through the day. I think that's, this talk, that's kind of what we're going to touch on. A little bit about who we are, how we can best help you, and then also our kind of best practices, parent bill of rights, and some things like that. I'm realizing now I don't have the slides in front of me, so I will keep turning around. They were pointing this out to me earlier and I didn't listen. So we are proud to be your official sports medicine partner for the Okaloosa County School District. That means a lot. We'll talk through some of that as well, but we are happy to be your healthcare partner in any way that we can do that. So if there's a need, something that you have, something you want more education on, greater understanding, a practice session, anything, we want to have you be as comfortable as possible. Our team, our athletic trainers are always going to be around, available, and accessible to you. But as I always say, I'm one person at one school, and there's a lot more kind of outnumbered there by the student athletes and sports and whatnot. So, we want you guys to feel empowered, knowledgeable, and comfortable as you can to respond and react when necessary. This is our leadership team, and if you want any of this additional information, we're happy to send you our contact information and get you these slides as well. Again, several of us are here. We've got Matt as our regional athletic training liaison. You see him a lot floating through. Jessica is our athletic training supervisor. You've probably already received some communications from her. And then we've got Tim Dunsford's our club sports liaison, Julie Kellen, PT by Trades, our executive director, and Dr. Michael Milligan is our director of growth and external development and our medical director. So you will see us float around. We do come out and do site visits. That is an opportunity for us to meet you guys, as well as a chance to connect with our staff out in the field and see how we can best be a resource to them there, anything they may need in that space. This is our team. So I won't make them stand up. You'll see them here. They're all going to speak. MC on the right there, Niceville, is out. We let her have the day off, getting ready for football, and everything's starting next week. But got Bree Gomez, new joining us this past year, but getting into the first full year. I think they're out at Crestview and helping at Laurel Hill, as well as Amanda McDonald out at Baker and Laurel Hill, and Nick Gutierrez at Choctaw, and Megan McKenzie, brand new. Excited to have Megan join us out at Fort Walton Beach full-time. And as many of you have probably seen, some of these interims, as we have turnover, we have a large team of PRNs and other full-time staff. You may see Jessica and Matt, those folks out there, but we're really proud of our team. You guys have a really well-seasoned, experienced group of ATs here, if we compare county to county, so just something to be proud of here. And we are all vendors, all have the cool county badges, so we do go through that process. Just a little bit about Andrews Institute. We do have a very diverse group of physicians, and of course, when you think about Andrews Institute, you think about orthopedics, but we have multiple other service lines as well. So if there's ever something we can help you with in a different subspecialty, please don't hesitate to reach out to us as well. If we don't know immediately, we will definitely help you find that answer. We are Mayo Clinic specialists, that sort of thing. We do have locations throughout the Panhandle, as well as, of course, our main campus in Gulf Breeze, but we have some medical parks that have orthopedic services in particular at Airport 9 Mile, and then also some at Baptist Hospital, we have that. I do want to point out Navarre, just especially for those of you in the south end of the county, we're really proud that we have opened a very new kind of hybrid model of an urgent care ED, emergency department, where you can go, you're triaged, and only billed, essentially, for the services that you need. So I know sometimes there's those services that, especially if you're maybe coming back from an away game, you may not necessarily drive that direction from here, but if that's en route, I always like to point that out, because that is a nice, new, very cutting-edge kind of model for that. That's in Navarre. And then Milton. We are proud to be, of course, in Fort Walton Beach. We have a new location. I hope most of you are aware of this, or maybe if you haven't gotten hurt, you're not, but 2010 Lewis Turner Boulevard, we did move from over on Racetrack. So a larger facility, nicer, newer facility there. And as Dr. Brothers kind of points out here in the bottom of his quote, we are excited that that's going to afford us the opportunity to offer some new services, some new service lines, having maybe some cardiology, things like that. So expect some more announcements about that in the coming year, I would anticipate on that. But we do have Dr. Brothers, Anthony Brothers. He's been in the area a long time. Niceville's team physician officially, but happy to serve all of the student athletes in the community within the area. So certainly see him, as well as his PA, Doug Block. They are great, very, very receptive to getting you guys in, and we try to do that obviously in a very timely fashion as quickly as possible. Our athletic trainers are great at helping with that. In terms of our program as a whole, if you're not as familiar, how many new coaches do we have? You've never heard us talk? I see 2 hands, okay. Well, as a refresher to everyone, we do have athletic trainers in 23 public high schools in a 4-county area. So the nice thing about that is, yes, you have your high school athletic trainers here, but when your teams go and play at any of those other schools in the 4-county area, we're most likely going to have an athletic trainer there as well. Now, if there's 3 events going on, same night, they may be running around, but they are there, they are available and accessible, so please don't hesitate to reach out to them as well. It's great. Our team works really closely together, they know each other, so they can certainly streamline that process for you. We also are involved with the Okaloosa Middle School, and we're really proud of that too, working with the covering football games, which we've been doing for a while, and then as well as expanding our services on that. And of course, if you guys are around community events, local colleges, performing arts, we are in those areas and arenas as well. So we're just everywhere, like I said, and if you know of something that you're involved with other groups and opportunity for us to get involved with that as well, just please reach out to us. We're happy to talk about that. We will talk a little bit more about Saturday morning injury clinic and concussion baseline testing, so I won't spend too much time on those, but just bouncing back real quick to the high school services. As a reminder, our high school athletic trainers are there for you pretty much every day. That can include Saturdays. The events are spread out across a 14-hour span at your school on a random day. We may not be there the entire 14 hours. We are, again, one person. We try to keep that schedule reasonable, but our athletic trainers should be working with you on that and communicating. If you're ever having any issues with that, please don't hesitate to reach out to Jessica or myself, but they're great about that, so happy to be available to everybody. We do have physicians available at the varsity games, and again, we'll talk about EAPs and additional educational opportunities, but that's really kind of what we're looking at there. And last for me right now, the scope of middle school services. Again, we're looking at expanding this. It's exciting stuff to be more involved. We hope that that's an opportunity, an avenue where we can continue to build and grow and get ingrained more and more with the middle schools, so that then they are already kind of teed up and know what to expect as they come to high schools from a health, safety, injury prevention standpoint. Hopefully they know how to stretch, they know how to warm up and cool down, and things like that. So that's a little bit about that, and we're going to just kind of keep passing and then go from there.
All right. Good morning. My name is Matt, and I'm kick it off, or my section off with talking a little about CPR and AD training. Many of you probably went through some of the CPR stuff that we did recently. We'll say that if for some reason you have not received an email or anything, please reach out as soon as possible so we can get you taken care of. I don't know if you've claimed it or not until you tell me. So. We look forward to future opportunities. I'm going to be coordinating that with Brian, make sure we get some dates that people are available and things like that, so it doesn't conflict with practices and games and things like that. But this summer, I'm proud to say that we were able to do just over 180 coaches between high school and middle school here in just Okaloosa County. So I think that's a huge accomplishment. We were able to get some brand new equipment to help facilitate that and help really give you that training that you really deserve. So, all right. Physician access. So here at Andrews Institute, our athletic trainers really strive to get your athletes in as quickly as possible. Now we can help with when parents want to go to Andrews, but anytime they want to go outside of our system, we have a lot more difficulty really communicating with those physicians and their practices. So when it comes to getting in with Andrews Institute, we can definitely help with that. Now, if somebody gets hurt around 4:30, it's really going to be hard to get them in the same day. So we're looking at 24, 48-hour access to those physicians and their practices. So, and then us as athletic trainers, we are certified and licensed healthcare professionals in the state of Florida. We're also certified by what's called the Board of Certification for Athletic Training. So it's a national certification. So just a quick background on that. We are trained, and we also collaborate with physicians to help with preventative care, emergency care, evaluations for injuries, therapeutic intervention, as well as rehab of injuries, and return to play. And here's most of our athletic trainers. I think the only one that's not on there is Megan. But for the most part, this is our Okaloosa team here. And just kind of some action shots with them, with some of the teams and various things. And I believe that middle one right there was that the championship game? Yeah. So that was the Baker championship game. So, okay. So, athletic healthcare team. Who is it? And what do you do? Okay, so it's a group of professionals who work together to prevent injuries, promote a safe playing environment, provide medical coverage and care for athletes, officials, and spectators to ensure the safety using this accepted best standards of clinical practice. I say all that to say, who are these people? Well, you, right? So anybody that comes in direct contact with these student athletes, anybody that comes in direct contact with spectators, officials, part of that healthcare team. Okay, it's not just the athletic trainers, it's not just EMS, not just the team physicians, it's anybody and everybody that can help in an emergency situation. Okay, so communication is very important, whether it's a practice or game, knowing what to do, when to do, how to do it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the EPs later. But we all start with the pre-participation physicals. We, as athletic trainers, we like to take a quick look at those and make sure that there's no predisposing factors that we need to know about. If someone has a history of, I don't know, say sickle cell, that's something that's very informative for us to know that, so that if something does happen during a practice or a game and they're showing those signs or symptoms, we can more quickly take care of them for that particular thing, and we don't necessarily think it's another thing. Some of the things that present as sickle cell, or some of the things that present similar to sickle cell can be heat related. So it kind of helps us better give the care needed much more quickly. Also, helping us with parent and booster club support, okay? So there might be some little things that we need to do. Maybe it's cleaning up the athletic training room, getting little things, maybe cabinets or some shelves or things like that. Maybe it's not in the budgets, but maybe the booster club can help with that, okay? All right, access to emergency entrances. So if there is an emergency, having those keys, having that ability to make sure that EMS has that direct access to that facility, to that location, okay? And knowing what, maybe there's some construction going on. Maybe there is a door that they can't come through because it's blocked off. Okay, so having that knowledge ahead of time as well. And then helping keep each other accountable. So really discussing the EAP, okay, preseason EAP discussion, making sure everybody's involved, knows what the plan is in case something happens. Okay, athletic trainers can only be at one place at one time. So if maybe they're over at the gymnasium and they're checking on basketball and some other sports going on, maybe soccer, something happens at soccer, you as a coach need to be prepared to be able to at least manage that situation until the athletic trainer can get there, or a more advanced emergency care. Okay, inviting the athletic trainers to parent meetings. It's important to have the athletic trainers in front of the parents to let them know who it is that's helping take care of their kids on a daily basis. Okay, the parents already know you. And in some cases, especially with the ones where we have newer staff, they might not know them yet. So being able to get them in front of them and give them their contact information so that they have questions or anything like that. Maybe little Johnny gets home one night, he was feeling great, and then all of a sudden, hey, his knee swells up. Being able to reach out to the athletic trainer when they notice these things is very beneficial to help better take care of them much more quickly. Okay. Day to day, helping with making sure we're adhering to policies and protocols, okay? Make sure we're doing all those things. Knowledge and awareness of your student athletes. So if there is an athlete that has sickle cell, for instance, or asthma, you know about these things so that you can help better take care of them, especially, again, the athletic trainer can't be there, okay? And then when the physicians are able to come on site, taking a second to say hi to them, get to know them, okay? They're here, they're taking time out of their clinics to help. Maybe it's cover a football game, or maybe they're stopping by to catch a basketball game. Take a half a second, just say hi, I appreciate you being here, okay? We really appreciate that interaction, okay? And then with injuries and things like that, we may ask you to help, maybe try to calm that student athlete or the parents if something traumatic has happened. Okay, helping keep the area clear during an emergency. That can be very beneficial to make sure that, maybe we're having to do CPR, making sure someone's not touching them if we're using AED. Or if there's a traumatic injury and there's a bone sticking out, blood everywhere, and people are falling over right and left because they fainted at the sight of blood. Whatever the case is, we try to keep that area clear, okay? We want to try to be as private as possible when doing those things to keep their privacy in mind. And then helping maybe retrieve emergency equipment or direct EMS if there is an emergency. So maybe if we run onto the field for a knee injury and we're like, hey coach, I need my bag. Taking half a second to either bring it or have someone else bring it out so that we could have the tools that we need. Okay. Reinforcing the recommendations for healthcare team. Okay. And then encouraging proper utilization of the athletic training services. Using us as helping to keep them on the field. We're not here to give them an excuse to get out of running or out of practice or anything like that. We don't want them out. We want them to practice. We want them to play. Okay. Everyone plays a vital role in the healthcare of the student athletes. So, anytime a medical injury or issue occurs, please contact the athletic trainer as soon as possible if they're not there on site. Okay. Regardless of the perceived severity of injury. So if it's, hey, it's just a minor sprained ankle, sprained wrist, things like that, we like to know as soon as possible so that we can follow up on that. Because if we don't follow up that same day, mom or dad might give a call to the school or the AD or someone else and go, hey, why did they not see the athletic trainer? And then we finally get to see it, and it just helps keep everything much cleaner, okay? Again, if the athletic trainer is not present, please communicate to them as quickly as possible. And maybe they're on a road trip. Still, give them a call. Optimal communication required for successful healthcare management. This is the biggest factor in being able to get the student athletes back to play as quickly as possible and safely as possible. Okay? This leads to the best potential outcomes for minimizing the risk for physical as well as legal. Okay? Making sure we're using multi-directional communications between parents, coaches, and ATs. So maybe it's not a phone call, maybe it's hey, I'm gonna walk over to the football practice and talk to the athletic trainer, because that's much easier than just giving them a phone call or shooting them an email. I have their direct and immediate attention. So if you ever have any questions on these types of things, please talk to your athletic trainers, okay? Please talk to them. I'm gonna pass it off to Bree.
Thank you. Okay, so emergency action plans, this is not a good time to just say run for it or say nose goes, right? You want to be ready in case an emergency does happen. So what is an emergency action plan? So these are the really pretty laminated signs that we put up at our sport venues. And the goal of these is for anyone to be able to use them. It has step-by-step instructions on what should happen should an emergency arise. So why do we have emergency action plans? So obviously, number one, it's because it's a high school league rule that we have these up and posted and we go over them. So the second reason is obviously just to give you guys a peace of mind in the event we're not there, especially over the summer when we're doing our baseline testing. It lets you guys be able to have a plan to follow so that you're not nervous in a situation. And then obviously the third reason would be that it gives the best care for the athletes, knowing that we're following each step correctly in order, and then not skipping a step that may be obviously really important to their specific situation. So as far as the content of the emergency action plan, I like to think of this as our who. So in this, it's a lot of who is the emergency team? Is it your athletic trainer, your team doctor, your coaches? Could it be your SRO, your AD? Also, who do we call as far as, do we need to let the principal know? Do we need to let our ADs know? Obviously the parents, if they are not there. Who has the equipment and where is it? Obviously we carry a lot of emergency equipment on the sideline, but it could also be like, where is our cold tub at? Is it actually behind the stadium at a water source, or is it in the field house? Also knowing who does each role. So this would be, who's your gatekeeper, who has all the keys, who's calling 911, who's in charge of crowd control, and also like who's gonna go flag down EMS at the gate to make sure they're coming in at the right spot. And then also who's gonna travel with your athlete if you have to send them. Especially if you're traveling at an away game, what if mom and dad didn't come? Make sure you have an assistant coach that can actually travel with the athlete to the emergency room, just so that it's somebody that knows them, but also so the kid's not freaking out. So with our maps, this is our where. So we actually post these with every emergency action plan at each venue. So this is a good thing to look at because you want to know where is EMS going to enter. My emergency gates differ depending on practice and game day, and you might even share a gate with multiple venues. So just knowing where that gate is at, and also, for example, our gym, what double doors maybe they coming in. And also, where is the athlete going to be going? We have 3 main hospitals near us. Obviously for us, North Okaloosa is our closest one, but it might not be the trauma center that we're actually going to send to. So make sure we know if they're going to, say, Twin Cities or for Walton. This is communication, especially for our parents. You don't want to tell a parent the wrong hospital while they're already freaking out, because then they're really going to be mad. And then also, the big thing to know here is know the address to your school, especially the person, if you have somebody in charge of calling 911, they know where you're at. So as far as equipment goes, the big thing here is knowing where your closest AED is. We each carry kind of like our personal AED on the sideline, but let's say we're not there, then where is your closest one? Is it in the field house? Is it in the gym? During school, is it in the nurse's office? Maybe the front office? So just knowing the closest one. And also, is it behind a locked door? Say if the nurse's office is your closest one, do you have keys to get in there? And then also, going back to also gate entry. But the big thing here too is our emergency, our equipment removal tools we carry. I personally like to carry mine in my fanny pack on game day. So just the coaches know where it would be at if they need to help me take off a helmet or take off any of the shoulder pads or anything like that. So this is it, right? Like, are we ready? You think we're ready for emergency? Not yet, right? So before every season, you guys have preseason, right? So we also have to have a preseason. So what happens in our preseason, and we're actually doing this right now, is redoing our emergency action plans and making sure they are all up to date, taking a couple things off, adding a couple new things, making sure if we have new coaches that their names are updated, not phone numbers, we took some of those off. But just making sure that all of that is ready. This is also our time to make sure that all of the AEDs are up to date and that the batteries are good, and any of our extra supplies like the razors or towels or anything like that are also stocked and ready to go. So the medical timeout, this is actually, I really like our medical timeouts because it's kind of fun because both sidelines converge, and this is kind of like where we do our pregame talk. You guys probably don't even realize that we do it, so it's actually just kind of a cool thing for us. But, and you might even be in other seasons like basketball or soccer, you might actually be a part of a medical timeout and not even know it. When we come introduce ourselves, we might go over what's on the sideline, or if you guys need anything, just so that if we need your help as well, then we're all kind of on the same page. So some things that we go over in a medical timeout are obviously introductions and responsibilities of each person on the sideline. Are we going to have hand signals with EMS depending on what type of injury it could be on the field? Where is our equipment located? Equipment removal tools. If we have to spine board somebody, what technique are we going to do? Are we going to remove any equipment at all at the time? As far as heat illness goes, where is our cold tub located, or maybe a water source? Our lightning plan, what are we going to do? The whole come off at 10 miles? Do you want us to alert you maybe a little bit earlier? Splinting options, are we using our equipment or our EMS's equipment? Bleed control kits and non-athlete management could go as far as like the crowd goes, but we also have to keep in mind too, like band and cheer, dance, anybody else that could also be at the game. So the healthcare team, there's a lot of people that are in our medical timeout. We have a lot of people on the sidelines normally that are helping us. I would say the two kind of big ones to point out, our SROs are really, really helpful at games, even during other seasons, because they can sometimes call EMS faster for us. So they're a really good resource for us. The other one is actually you guys. When emergency happens, a lot of what we need is crowd control, and we need room to work. So a lot of you guys we use as kind of like our get back coaches. And you're also able to kind of talk to the team and maybe tell them what we might be doing at the time, because they see their friend on the ground and they're not sure what's happening. So it's a lot of you guys being able to comfort them and tell them what is going on. So after an emergency event, this is kind of like our film, right? When you guys watch film to kind of get better at what you're doing. So this is the same thing for us. We like to go over what went good, what went bad in that situation, so that hopefully it doesn't happen again. But if it were, what do we need to keep the same, or if we need to change anything moving forward, just so that the kid, well, that we both feel better working together, but also that the kid we know is safe and that they don't have anything to worry about either. So the big thing here is just remembering to work as a team and to really communicate. For us, obviously, it's normal for us to kind of run to, obviously, emergency situations, and so you guys might not feel as comfortable in that, but just working with us and kind of listening to what we're saying and what we need help with really helps us out a lot, and just communicating and going over, like again, what went well, what went bad, really just helps us out in an emergency situation.
Thank you, Bree. All right, so Matt and Bree have kind of talked about how we prepare for an emergency and everything leading up to the actual emergency. Now we're going to kind of get into that part where we talk about some specific emergencies and how we handle each of those. So first, just some general medical. Matt mentioned our PPEs. So we get these physicals at the beginning of each season. We really want to make sure that we are looking through them, looking for what we call the red flags. Like Matt said, sickle cell. Kids have asthma. If they have asthma, do they have an inhaler? Who's going to have that inhaler on the sideline? Where's that going to be located? I like to make what I call a red flags list, and so I know for each team all the medical issues that I have going on. A big part of what we do is prevention. So knowing these things ahead of time is what's going to help us prevent some of these injuries from happening. So do they have a history of heat illness? Do they have any surgeries? Are they diabetic? Knowing all those things. So please make sure as you get physicals, if they're coming straight to you, that your athletic trainer does have access to these and that they can see them. We really want them to be able to look over these and collaborate with you. Good example, was working out at a high school recently over the summer. A coach got a physical. Kid had a high hematocrit level. He can't acclimatize as well to the heat. So coach, the AD football coach, he shot me an email and let me know this. So I really want that communication so that you're aware of issues and we're aware of issues as well. If a kid is sick, they're running a fever, been to the doctor, they don't need to be practicing. It's a risk to them, obviously a risk to the rest of your team because you don't want the rest of your team to get sick. So please hold them out. It's not of benefit to you or to them to keep them practicing, playing if they're sick. Another big thing that we deal with, especially during football season, is skin infections. If a child has a skin infection, they need to see a physician so it can be treated appropriately. General rule is they need to be seen by a physician and on antibiotics for 48 hours before returning, and it needs to be covered when they return. So if you notice, skin lesion or anything on a kid, send them to the athletic trainer so that we can look at it and help get them the appropriate care. So we have what we call the 4 H's. These are the leading cause of deaths in high school athletics. We have the heart, the head, hemoglobin, which is sickle cell, and heat. So we're going to go through each of these. I'm going to start with the heart, and then Nick's going to go into the head and talk a little bit about concussion. But we want to make sure that you're as best prepared as you can be to help us with these emergencies. I'm really proud of what we do in all of our counties. I'm born and raised in Okaloosa County, graduated from Baker, so I'm really proud to be in Okaloosa County and what we do here. And I tell people, one day my kids are going to be going to school in Okaloosa County, and coaches and athletic trainers in this room at Andrews are going to be taking care of them. So I want to know that the kids in my community, and one day my kids, they're getting people that are best prepared to be able to handle this, and I'm putting the best athletic trainer out there and equipping them as good as possible and equipping you to be able to handle these emergencies and take care of our kids and our communities, because one day that's going to be my kids too. Here's a little chart. It's kind of hard to read up here. We do have a version of this in our heat policy that the athletic trainer can get you a copy of. It's what we call differential diagnosis. Matt hit on this. Some of these heat exhaustion, sickle cell, concussion, sometimes they can all present a little bit alike. So you have to know those key things that differentiate those so you can tell how best to proceed in treating that athlete. So the leading cause of death in high school athletics is sudden cardiac arrest. There's a 67% of cases that happen in football and basketball. Within our coverage area, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago now, we actually had 3 cases in our coverage area within 1 year of sudden cardiac arrest. Thankfully, we had good outcomes because the staff and athletic trainers on site were prepared. They knew where the AEDs were. They got those on the victims in a timely manner, and they were able to recover. One of those happened to be at a high school on like a weekend practice. It was on a Saturday or Sunday. It was a club team come in. Nobody, athletic trainer went there, but there was a coach with that team that worked at the school, and he knew the emergency action plan, and he knew where the AED was, and they were able to save that athlete. So the warning symptoms of athletes having chest pain, looking especially labored, syncope, so they're near passing out or they've passed out, irregular heartbeat, shortness of breath. Be watching for all those warning signs. If a kid just all of a sudden collapses and falls, we're assuming it's sudden cardiac arrest until we know otherwise. So again, assume it's sudden cardiac arrest until it's proven otherwise. They can have, and Matt, Bree, or Amanda probably talked about this in your CPR classes, but they can have what we call agonal breathing, so they're kind of gasping for air. That's not normal breathing. We'd still apply the AED in that situation and activate our EAP. The goal is to get that AED on 1 minute from collapse to shock. Every minute that passes, their chances of survival decreases 7 to 10%. So it's really important that you know where the AED is, like Bree said, and have access to it. All our athletic trainers do have one with them on the sideline, personally issued to them. I always tell people, like, don't be afraid to apply the AED. It's going to tell you exactly what to do. It's not going to shock that athlete unless they need to be shocked. So don't be afraid to put it on. You're not going to hurt them. You're going to save their life by being able to get it there in a timely manner and shock them if necessary. So there actually are some requirements now that are state law associated with the AED. So these next few slides, you'll see some things in red, what's highlighted in red. That means that it's required by FHSA policy and state law. So we really want to make sure that we know these things and have the AED on hand. Matt told you we recently certified over 180 coaches. That's because now with the Zachary Martin Act, we're required to have a coach, school member on site that is certified in CPR, AED for every practice and game. Can't rely on that just being the athletic trainer. There's only one of us. We can only be at one practice at a time. That's why it's important that all of you are certified as well. The school is responsible for making sure that everyone who is CPR and AED certified knows where the AEDs are on their campus and that you can get to them. So if you don't know that before Monday when practices start, please make sure that you talk with other coaches, athletic trainer, make sure you know where those AEDs are on your campus. Few COVID reminders. As practices get going, as you've seen during the summer, our athletic trainers will still be wearing their mask on campus. We work for Baptist Healthcare, and that's their policy, so you will see us still wearing masks on campus. We have to do what we can to keep our staff and student athletes safe. We ask that you please be a partner with us and help us in that. I don't have an endless supply of athletic trainers. If we have an athletic trainer get sick, I can't just like pull an athletic trainer out of a hat to send you another one. So please help us in keeping our athletic trainers safe and healthy so they can take care of your athletes, because that's where we want them, is taking care of our athletes. If you have a student athlete diagnosed with COVID, they should be appropriately quarantined. The big thing for us from a medical standpoint is they have to be cleared by a physician before returning to play. They will need to go through a return to play period similar to what we do with concussion and heat illness to make sure that they're returned to play appropriately. There's a lot of unknown risks still with COVID. Long-term side effects still aren't really known. We do know that there can be cardiac, heart-related side effects. That is one thing that is known. So we do encourage, strongly recommend any of your athletes that have had a case of COVID be evaluated by a pediatric cardiologist. We do partner with Nemours, so athletic trainers. We have a contact at Nemours. We can help facilitate an appointment if that's needed and the parents request it. We have that connection. For our athletes that come through our physical event that we do every summer that all our partner schools are invited to, we actually have the pediatric cardiologist for Nemours on site. And if kids have had a history of COVID or they have other markers for a cardiac-related issue, we will do an EKG on site and then refer them for further workup if needed. Again, just continue to follow school district, state, and CDC guidelines. And make sure that we're cleaning our facilities appropriately. That not only helps with COVID, it also helps with those skin infections that we talked about earlier. Wiping down the benches and weights and things after we weight lift, wiping down mats, all those things. We do have some guidance sheets that we sent out last year before we got back to athletics that had a chart with appropriate cleaners and it included these recommendations on it. So if you'd like another copy of that, we can get that to you. We have a couple different recommendation documents typed up, but please help us in keeping those areas clean so we can keep our athletes on the field. All right, I'll pass it to Nick, and he's going to hit on concussions and head injuries.
Yes. All right, guys, we're past halfway here, so hang in there, all right? My name's Nick Gutierrez. I'm the athletic trainer at Choctaw. It's my 4th year there and 7th overall as an athletic trainer. So I'm going to be getting into one of our favorite topics, concussions. I'm sure most of you guys have dealt with it as a coach before and possibly as an athlete. So we're just going to go over briefly, just a quick couple of key points as to how to recognize concussion, the protocols, what we need to do, and who the athletes need to be seen by. Okay, so just to kind of wake you guys up a little bit, we'll do a quick little true or false. All right, so after we read the question, give me a true or false here. You have to hit your head to sustain a concussion. True or false? Good answers. Well, it's false, all right? You don't necessarily have to hit your head. It can be a whiplash type injury. It's really just the force on the brain being shaken in the head that can result in a concussion. So CT scans, MRIs, diagnose concussions. I hear a true, I hear a false. Well, that's false, okay? We can't see concussions necessarily. What they're looking for is bleeds in the brain, okay? That's what they're looking for when we do those CT scans, okay? Sorry, I skipped one. Concussion is a serious head injury? Yes, it's a serious head injury. I'm sure that one was an easy true there. They're graded from mild to severe. It's actually false. We don't grade those out anymore, all right? Everything's these concussions are very subjective, so we kind of just take it day to day, symptom to symptom. Every athlete's different. Everybody's not going to have the same symptoms, not the same severity, so we don't really grade them out anymore, okay? Concussion symptoms may not appear at the time of an injury. That's true, all right? They can happen the next day, they can happen 2 days, they can happen weeks later, all right? So it's real good just to kind of know those symptoms and get a good history whenever an athlete might have a suspected concussion, okay? So just some facts. Like I said, concussion is an injury from a force applied to the head. So like we said, it might not just be a blow to the head. I had an athlete one time in a football game, got kind of pulled by his face mask, ripped out of the tackle, and it shook his head a little bit. And at halftime, he played a quarter after that, but then at halftime he started exhibiting concussion-like symptoms. We went back to the film the next day and saw where he had that injury, okay, because he didn't recall getting ever hit in the head hard. That can easily happen. So like I said, it might not be a direct blow. And like we said before, imaging is not going to give you signs or symptoms of concussion, but they're just looking for those bleeds and everything, okay? So it's important, again, to just kind of go over the history of it with the athlete. If they had symptoms or if they have a history of concussion, they're a little more susceptible to having a second one or third or fourth. So prevention, there's really no strong evidence as far as equipment to prevent concussions or just to prevent concussions in general. All that, the helmets, mouth guards, face masks, everything like that is going to be protecting, facial injuries, fractures, lacerations, things like that. So that equipment doesn't necessarily prevent concussions, but there are a few things that we can do to kind of not necessarily prevent, but keep us aware of them, and that's education, all right? Teaching our athletes what the signs and symptoms are, what to look for, specifically maybe for sports like football, lacrosse, things like that, technique, all right? Teach them the correct techniques, how to tackle properly, soccer, how to head the ball correctly, can kind of limit our exposure to concussions, okay? So that's that there. So when should an athlete be removed from play? All right, we say anytime that they're experiencing a sign or symptom of concussion, we need to remove them from play. So the number one symptom is a headache, okay? Now, if someone doesn't have a history of hitting their head, then that might not necessarily mean they had a concussion. All right? If they are dehydrated or something like that, they can have a symptom of a headache. All right? So it's important to you as coaches to help us out a little bit and get a history from the athlete and say, hey, you know, you have a headache. Okay, well, what's going on? Did you hit your head? No, coach, I didn't hit my head. You've been hydrating? No, I haven't really been hydrating. Well, then maybe they're just dehydrated, okay? So some symptoms can replicate a concussion, but we got to get a good history. So you guys can help us out with that by getting a history and asking questions just to help us out a little there. If you're not sure, sit them out, all right? Like we said before, there's one of us, a lot of sports going on. If you're not sure, then just sit them out, wait for us to kind of come in, get an evaluation done. You don't want to risk putting them back in, risk them, there's a syndrome called second impact syndrome, which is highly associated with death. That's receiving another concussion when you already have one, you haven't healed fully back from your first one, okay? So when in doubt, sit them out. Florida state law says that if you are suspected of concussion, you can't come back to return to play the same day, okay? So just be aware of that. So again, this is kind of what we've just been saying. It's a couple things, especially for the ADs that are in here. For those AT-18 forms, you can find those on the FHSA website. Those need to be kept on file for 7 years. So make sure you get a copy of that whenever we have those forms filled out. And another thing is communication. We're going to harp on communication a lot. Parent meetings are a great time to communicate between the parents, the coaches, and the athletic trainers. So we ask you guys to let us know when we're having those coaches meetings so that we can kind of explain the protocols behind it to the parents, because a lot of times they'll go maybe to an urgent care, they'll see a nurse practitioner, and they're not allowed to sign off on an AT-18 form to return to play. It has to be a medical doctor or a DO, so MD or DO. So it's good to communicate with the whole team. Let us know when we're having these meetings. We can talk to parents and kind of give them that information as well, okay? If we do have a concussion, we need to wait till the athlete's symptom-free, okay, over a 24-hour period. So there's this thing called return to learn. I know you guys all see the return to play protocol, but there's also return to learn. And essentially what it is just them going through a full day of school without any return of symptoms, okay? So if they're not ready to go sit in a classroom and work, then they're definitely not going to be ready to go back to any kind of exertion, okay? So that's returning to learn. And then the return to play protocols, that 5-step protocol where it's just a gradual increase of exertion from jogging to more sport-specific drills to a full practice. If they go through all of these steps each day without return of symptoms, they can move to the next one. Once they go through that full practice day, they go back to the physician and they clear them to come back to play. So once they complete this, they're not necessarily ready to come back, but they need to go back and see the physician to get signed and cleared to come back to full competition, okay? And then, so what we do over the summers is that neurocognitive baseline testing. That's that C3 logics we do. In Okaloosa County, it's required. It is required for all athletes to have either the C3 logics done or the impact testing done. They can also sign to decline testing, and that's fine too, but it's required by everybody. So if some of your athletes, we saw a lot of them over the summer, if they haven't, then you need to get with your athletic trainer to help you guys get the impact testing done. That can be done by you as well, but if you need help with that, reach out to us and we'll help you out with that as well, okay? So again, just the key points for making sure that they're being seen by an MD or DO, okay? And then just the communication back with us to make sure we have all the correct paperwork and everything, all right? Cool. So here's Amanda. Thanks.
So I'm Amanda. I'm an athletic trainer at Baker. I've been in the county for about 12 years, been at Baker for 2. So we're going to talk about the next 2 H's of our 4. So one that's not very common that we don't see very often is the sickle cell trait. And basically what it is the athlete carries a trait where their red blood cells will turn into a sickle shape versus a circle. So if you notice on the picture here, on the left-hand side, that's a normal vein where the blood cells are actually going through at a normal rate and shape. And then on the left side, that's where they're sickling. They're like all ramming into the vein and causing it to clog so that it's not actually getting good blood supply to that area. So that's whenever the athlete is going to have some muscle spasms, or they're going to say they're having muscle spasms, but you may not actually see it. They're going to have a lot of pain. This is an emergency. We need to get this patient to the doctor, to the hospital. So it's usually in African Americans. Some risk factors are heat, dehydration, altitude. Of course, we're not dealing with that much here. Asthma can also worsen their sickling. Always call 911 if you witness this event. This is something that we need to be screening for in our pre-participation exams. So there's a little check mark. I think it's the last question on the exam. It says, do you have the sickle cell trait? If they mark yes, we need to make sure that we have educated that patient on this is what you may experience, this is what you need to report to us, and then we're educating coaches, hey coach, this is what we need to look out for, these are the recommendations we make for this patient, and we're also notifying the parent that we're aware and letting them know that this is what we're going to do for this patient if this happens. So signs and symptoms could include the athlete's muscles feel weak and cramping but still look normal. The athlete may slump to the ground rather than sudden collapse. They're usually able to speak. They have some rapid breathing and some abdominal pain is usually noted. These patients aren't sitting out. We're not going to hold them from practice or hold them from participation. We just need to make accommodations for that patient so that they can still participate. So this is what you'll see usually from us. If someone has indicated that they have sickle cell trait, we have this document here that we'll sign. We have the coach sign, the parent signs, patient signs, so that everybody's on the same page for what we're doing for this athlete. So say you have an event of sickle cell trait, or a sickle cell crisis, I should say. We want to make sure that that patient is seen by a physician, they're cleared to return to play, and then we have a return to play protocol, kind of like our concussion protocol. We're going to slowly integrate them back into practice, and then at the very end, the doctor is going to sign off on that, and we'll let them get back out there to play. So on to the last four, or the number 4H of the 4 H's is heat, and of course this is what we deal with every day in the state of Florida. Our cross-country and football athletes are most at risk because they're practicing outside in the heat, 3 o'clock every day. They have the most exposure to the heat. So we want to make sure that we're preparing for this event. And to do that, we're going to do the acclimatization period. So we want to make sure that they're getting that, first 3 days of helmets only, and then the next 2 days are shells only. And we're like integrating them into practice. And you want to make sure that they're practicing at a similar time every day so they're getting the same heat exposure. So know what your risk factors are. There's environmental risk factors that we can't prevent. We can't do anything about that, but we can work with it. And then the individual risk factors, we can do something about that. We can encourage our athletes to be hydrated. We can encourage our athletes to wear appropriate clothing. We can set up practice time for the best time of the day for that athlete. We can encourage them not to lose sleep, to eat a good meal before they come in. And that will also go back to what Nick was talking about with how we can differentiate between a different diagnosis, where is it a head injury, is it a heat illness injury, is it maybe they do have some sickle cell trait or something like that. We need to make sure that we can differentiate between those, and this is going to be the best way, is if we prepare our athlete by hydrating, eating, and having them in appropriate attire. So everyone should be familiar with the Zach Martin Act. We kind of talked about it a little bit before, but if you need more info on that, we're happy to go over that with you as well. We should be reviewing that every year. We're going to try to prevent heat illnesses, of course, make recommendations for hydration, and we want to make sure that hydration and rest breaks are allowed based on the wet bulb globe reading, and access to water should always be available. They should never go through a time where we're not letting them get water. Those days are long gone and far behind us, okay? We're always offering water to our athletes. The wet bulb globe thermometer is what we're using at our events or our practices every day. We're actually going to check them every 30 minutes, and if we see a big change in the temperature, here typically we start out practice too hot if we're going after school, and then we may run into lightning or something right after that, so we're having to modify practice every single day. And yes, it's a headache. It's a headache for you, it's a headache for us. Nobody likes it, nobody wants to do it. It is what it is. So we're going to make recommendations for practice. If we fall into the yellow, we start out in the yellow, we can still be in shells and helmets. We're just increasing our rest time and maybe getting rest and shade. And then if we fall into the red 30 minutes later, then we're going to modify and we're going to make recommendations to modify our practice that time. If we fall into the green, instead of going down, we go up, and it's a better situation for our athletes, then we'll also notify you of that too. Make sure that we have a heat, illness, cooling zone set up so you can get creative. Like here, we had to get creative on the sideline of a extra event that's not at one of our high schools, and we used a swimming pool. Well, no, that's a boat, I guess, an inflatable boat as a cooling area. But we need to make sure that we have ice coolers available to our athletic trainers. We want to have at least 2 10-gallon, 20-gallon ice coolers on site for our athletic trainers to be designated to ice only so that we can be ready for a heat emergency. And then, of course, shady area for water breaks. So this is the differences in the heat illnesses. So you can start with exertional muscle cramping, and then it works all the way up to heat stroke, where they have like every symptom in the book. So we don't talk about are they sweating anymore? Do they look clammy? We don't talk about that anymore. If they are exerting any kind of symptom of a heat illness, we're going to try to dunk them in that water cooler. And so when we have the rectal thermistors that are checking their core temperature, and that's the best practice for us, we will be in charge of that. We don't expect coaches to take care of that. And we're going to try to get a rectal temp on them if we can, put them in the tub, cool them until they're below 102, and then EMS, of course, is called immediately. So that's what I just talked about. And then reminders, of course, any athlete can suffer a heat illness. It's not just a matter of fitness or toughness. Know the signs and symptoms of heat illness and heat stroke. And us athletic trainers, we can always help you with requirements for the Zach Martin Act so that you can be in compliance with that, and we're taking care of the athletes the best that we can. Thank you.
All right, my name is Megan McKenzie. I'm, like Kathleen said, brand new to the area, just moved down to Florida 3 weeks ago, so learning all this on the fly. As you guys know, lightning and severe weather are a huge problem, and they can happen anywhere in the country. Unfortunately, Florida tends to be the epicenter of lightning. As you can see from that chart, from 2005 to 2014, Florida accounted for approximately 15% of all lightning fatalities, which unfortunately is not a great number, so we need to be prepared. Also, in that picture, it kind of shows statistics of where most lightning strikes happen. Unfortunately, the vast majority of them occur in large open fields, which is typically where athletic competitions occur. So we have policies and procedures in place to prevent this from happening. And then one question people has is it possible to have thunder without lightning? The answer is no. Thunder is a direct result of lightning. However, you can see lightning but not hear the thunder. Another big thing to remember in events and practices, anyone who's out on the field, if there's a threat of severe weather, needs to be aware of the plans. So it's not just the football team, the football coaches, it's cheerleaders, dancers, administrators, anyone involved on the practice, because everyone needs to be able to take shelter if there is severe weather that comes about. So one of the things that you can do at events for severe weather is Andrews provides a script for PA announcements. And in those scripts, they should talk about things like safe places to go in the event of an emergency, and also the policy that you can return to sport 30 minutes after the last lightning strike. So one of the most common questions we'll get is, what is considered a safe place to shelter during storms? Typically, the safest places are auditoriums, gymnasiums, field houses, anything like that, but you have to avoid plumbing and electrical. And no, safe places do not include dugouts, batting cages, anything like that. Even if they have a roof, they're not truly covered, therefore they're not truly a safe place to go. And then at Andrews, we have specific lightning policies. As you can see up there, if there's lightning detected within 30 miles, it's our job to let the coaches know that, hey, there's weather in the area, it could come this way, it could have to make modifications to practices events. When lightning gets within 15 miles of the area, we issue a watch, which lets coaches know that severe weather is creeping closer and we need to be ready to make modifications. When lightning hits within 10 miles, that means all practice event, anything needs to be paused, everyone needs to be moved to their safe space, no one can remain outside. And then, as I mentioned before, 30 minutes after the last lightning strike, activity is clear to resume. Another reminder, if the athletic trainer isn't present, like they've mentioned before, there's only one of us, many of you guys, it's everyone's job to be responsible for monitoring weather, because clearly lightning injuries can happen. So here in Okaloosa County, all of the schools have Earth Network, which is the lightning detection system provided by the school district. Basically what it is, it's a big horn that sits on the top of the schools, and it provides clear instruction and direction for weather. The signals, one horn means that lightning is within 10 miles and practices and events should be paused, everyone needs to move to the safe shelter. Once the lightning has cleared 10 miles, there will be 3 long, loud horns. That means activity is good to resume. And this is a tool for peace of mind, so it doesn't rely on just the athletic trainer. It can put everyone at peace knowing that weather has cleared. So as I mentioned before, lightning safety is everyone's responsibility, so there are many ways you can monitor this. One of the apps we recommend using is WeatherBug, and then there's also computers, radios, TVs, anything like that, smartphones, anything that has ways to view, radar, things like that. And then one of the common slogans we use for weather is, when you hear thunder, go indoors. Because when you hear thunder, lightning can strike, and we don't need any sort of injuries like that to come about. And so this part is not mentioned on the slide, but I'm going to give you a little bit of first aid guidelines. So one of the first things you need to know is that it's a common misconception, but a victim of a lightning strike does not carry an electrical charge. So it is okay to touch them after a victim has been struck by lightning. So after you notice that someone has been struck by lightning, the first thing you want to do is make sure the scene's safe, because obviously thunder, lightning, ongoing storms can pose threats to the victim, the responder, anyone involved. So after you make sure the scene is safe, you need to activate EMS, because lightning is a medical emergency. After that, move the victim. If it's still raining, thundering, move them to a more safe location and proceed with treatment. If the victim is unconscious, not breathing, no pulse, begin CPR and use an AED if it's available, because that will help prevent more serious consequences. Once those have been treated, you need to be aware of possible spinal injuries, hypothermia, anything like that that also could arise outside of just the lightning strike. And that being said, the goal of our monitoring the weather is not to keep you from practicing. We want to keep you practicing, but we want to keep you practicing in the most safe manner possible. And one last point, don't forget about summer, off-season, anytime athletic trainers are not on campus. It's up to everyone to ensure that this becomes is a priority and safety is maintained at all times.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you, Megan, and thank you to the whole team. Can we give them like all a round of applause? Thank you. They did really good. And if you can't tell, we all are, but they are definitely super passionate about keeping your student athletes and your community safe. As Jessica said, I'm going to take this second to say, we really do approach this as if and when that's our children. I'm a new parent. I have a 7-month-old, and I will say that's definitely brought a fresh perspective of this to me. Many of you probably have children in the school system now or have had, and so just know that that's kind of our part of our commitment to you, is that we approach this, what we do every day, with that mentality and that spirit that we know we are taking care and have a lot of trust, and we appreciate your commitment to do that alongside us. So please just do know that. This is probably my least favorite of all this to talk about, but I do want to take a moment. I believe everyone in here should have heard of the Parental Bill of Rights that has come out. This has been in the last month and a half. And this is something that really truly did come sweeping through the legislature very quickly. I know it has some academic components as well that I'm not sure if those affect you in a different way from that standpoint as well. But this is something that for us, this is very real and tangible. So as Matt mentioned earlier, our athletic trainers are licensed healthcare professionals, and we fall into a different category from even like emergency medical service technicians and EMTs, those folks. So from that standpoint, it is very critical for us with this new legislature that we have a written parental consent to provide treatment before we provide any treatment. This is something that's always been the case, but now there is new legislature that has come out where there are very specific outlined legal ramifications if we provide care without written consent. There's a very small area, and I'm not a legal expert, but there's a very small area from talking with our team and looking at all this where things fall under Good Samaritan versus, requirements when you are a licensed healthcare provider. So for our athletic trainers and team physicians, we appreciate you guys. I know you've been having to work on these EL3 addendum updates. These are very, very important to us. I'm sure you probably, and definitely our athletic directors, but coaches, just please know this is new, but it's unfortunately not going away. We just really need your help and participation in making sure that every student athlete has the proper documentation. This year in particular, we need to make sure we have that addendum so we have the strongest language possible that allows us to practice to the to the full scope of our abilities and provide the best care we can. And just know that if something comes up where student athlete or a fan or someone else, we can't verify that, we may have to kind of just speak to them at first and then follow up later. And we'll facilitate that, we'll do that. But I just want you guys to understand that is very new, very real for us. The last thing our team wants to do is kind of have our hands tied on that in any way, but we do have to approach that very seriously and make sure that we're covering ourselves from our license and our practice act and ensuring we have the proper consent. So just kind of wanted to touch on that. Does anyone have any questions specifically about that right now? I don't want to glaze past that. Okay. Perfect. Two other things. I'm going to actually let Jess talk on this one, but we got a couple other things that we are excited to be involved with that I just want to let you guys know about.
We're excited. A couple years ago, we began a partnership with Children's Home Society. They provide a lot of services to the youth across the state and in the Panhandle area, counseling, mental health services, foster care. They get kids jobs and training. So they provide a lot of different services. We partnered with them to provide training to our staff as well. There's a lot of research that shows how athletics positively impacts kids. So we've partnered with them to train our staff. We've had trainings, abuse and neglect, substance abuse, suicide in adolescence, stress and anxiety in adolescence. We really want to work in our communities to be able to use athletics as a tool to improve the quality of life in our adolescents in the community. We want you to help us be a partner in that. We've learned how to identify some of these at-risk athletes and how to help them when we do identify these issues. If you know an athlete is struggling, see a student struggling, we have resources that we can connect them with. If you know an athlete or a student that's struggling, encourage them to participate in athletics. We have a lot of research that shows how that benefits kids and adolescents. Encourage them to interact with the athletic trainer. Again, we want to be a resource. We have resources to connect them to Children's Home Society and get them help that they might need. Our staff has gone through this training. We want to work with you if you're interested in having some of this trainings and your coaches' meetings. We'd be happy to help facilitate that as well and set that up too. So just another way that we can partner with you and help provide the best care possible to the student athletes in our community. Another partnership that we're excited about, I'll let Kathleen talk a little more about this one.
Yep, so we're working with our Baptist Cancer Institute. Again, we go beyond just orthopedics. Our team is really excited to be able to work with the Cancer Institute to spread awareness and knowledge about screening and how screening and being proactive, preventing what you can, but we know we can't prevent all cancers and issues from appearing. So they're very passionate about how screening really just saves lives and it gets us through to survivorship. So this is new for us this year. You'll see our team, we're going to have some pink shirts and different shirts. See them in a little bit different apparel, but that's something that's going to come out. And what I really want to pass along too is and we know most every sport has, no matter what time of year, has some either a Think Pink game or some sort of awareness game or tournament, anything like that. We would love to come out and help be a part of that and just spread additional awareness. Obviously, your athletic trainers still be around helping cover that, but our team will come out and we can set up in the lobby or set up a table, booth, anything like that. We'd love to do that. So if you have those events, those, or as those get put on your calendar, and you can pass those along to your athletic trainers, and they'll pass, or straight to us, either way. We'd love to be a part of those things. So just wanted to pass that along to you guys. Real quick, Student Athlete Injury Clinic, told you I'd mention it. This is the actual flyer for this year. We are getting those printed, so we'll have some hard copies to get to you. Those are running August 21st through November 6th this year. I think that's 12 weeks, if you count correctly. That should include preseason to the fall. Quick reminders, that runs from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., first come, first serve. We do close the doors at 10 a.m. And then that is open for ages 5 and up, as long as they're a student athlete. They do not have to just be your student athlete. They can be younger. It's not just football. It's all sports. We see a mixture, and everyone's welcome for that. We will have a location here again in Fort Walton Beach at the new location on Lewis Turner Boulevard. So we're excited about that. And overall, just, we're proud to help carry on this winning tradition in Okaloosa County. And you guys you're awesome. As Jess said, you really have been ahead of the curve. We're proud of all of our counties, but you guys really have been ahead of the curve. So we appreciate, Brian, your dedication to that, and of course letting us come and do these things. And again, it takes everyone doing that. Everyone's on the athletic healthcare team. So these are just some fun pictures of that. But last thing I just want to say is, I don't know, there's headlines all the time, but I saw one just yesterday of a 15-year-old in Macon, Georgia, who collapsed, was in distress, and did some sort of collapse. There's not a lot of details on it, but ended up dying. First day of practice. Shorts practice. They were, the coaches said, hey, we saw he was in distress, called 911, responded correctly. Obviously, we'll probably learn more details about that, and we hate to hear that. But like I said, bad things can happen. Sometimes there's predisposing factors that we don't know about. These things are so important. Like I said, when I approached my field days of athletic training, when I'm in the field, I want to know that I could go home and sleep at night and know that I did the best that I could for my student athletes, their families, coaching staff, school districts, all those folks. So again, we're very passionate about this. We want you to be as comfortable as you can. We're going to be there all the time. But again, there's one of us in some of these bigger schools. If you're a cross-country coach and you want to understand, hey, what's the best way I can be prepared for these situations? If you're, lacrosse off-site, any sport, we want to help you. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us on those things. So we're available whenever. Any questions about any of that? Some of it, it's just there's legal pieces that are required. You guys have been ahead of all that. There's just more now that's actual legal law that we have to follow. So keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank y'all, and we appreciate everything Andrews does. They do a lot of the work, but as coaches, we still hold that responsibility. We hold that responsibility for each of our programs. So if you've got concerns, use them as a resource. Thank y'all. So the last couple of things we need to go over is the next is going to be transportation, and Mr. Jay McGinnis has come here to speak to us a little bit about transportation, and I'll just share with y'all that transportation is probably 75-80% of your budget, that your cost is getting your team from this point to that point. If you want to go to Orlando or Texas or Tampa, the transportation is a huge cost. And so he can talk to you about that. And in your folder, you have a document that outlines the 5 different ways you can transport students. You have to use one of those ways. You can't put kids in cars or transport kids in vans or things without going through some procedures. So when you're planning your season and planning on getting where you need to go, you need to plan the cost of it, and then you need to plan how you're going to take care of it, and it has to be one of those 5 ways. But I'm going to let Mr. McGinnis discuss buses and things that's going on with the bus shop and drivers and things like that, okay?
Thank you, Brian. You did a good job of doing my presentation for me. But anyway, I just want to say, first of all, thank you, because I know a lot of you guys and women drive buses already for your teams, and we do really appreciate that. And it does help you out, and it helps us out as well from the scheduling standpoint. And this past year, many of you drove routes for us at your school, and that helped us out tremendously. We would not have made it through the year without you guys helping us drive some of these routes. So I want to say I appreciate all that before I get started. But as Brian said, you have a flyer in your folder that mentions the few ways that we can do trips. First of all, obviously, y'all put in a field trip requisition with our office, and we simply schedule it with one of our drivers to come pick you up and take you to your destination and bring you back. That's the way most of you do it normally. Second would be if one of y'all drove the bus, got the bus from us, you would request that through us. We would schedule it. You'd come pick up the bus and go get your team and take them to the trip. The third way that we do it, some of you like to do a drop-off only trip, which means in county. We will let you do that because you may have to leave at 3 o'clock. Parents aren't available, but parents will all be at the game when it ends at 7 or 8. As long as you ensure that those parents and all your student athletes have a ride back, then we're fine with that. Because we can come and get you from any place in the county with a bus if something was to happen as far as inclement weather or the game was canceled halfway through or whatever. I've got bus stops in 3 different locations, so wherever you're at in our county, we can have a bus to you within a few minutes. So we will allow you to do a one-way drop-off trip if you stay in county with that. Next, we want to talk about if you have a parent that wants to drive in a private vehicle. This is something that you really need to pay attention to and make sure you get with your principal on. It can be done, but there's some things like Brian said that we need to ask y'all to do for us. And one of those being, obviously, let us have the parent's driver's license number so we can run a driver's license and check on them to make sure that they have a current license and it's up to date and things of that nature if they're going to be driving students in their private vehicle. And we'll also check to make sure they have the right insurance and things of that nature. The next one would be if you lease a vehicle, say a van or some type of a transportation. Say you're going to a cheerleading camp and you have 5 cheerleaders or whatever, and your cheerleading sponsor is going to drive them. Well, we would need to make sure that that van is the appropriate size. Can't lease big, large vans that hold 18 or 20 kids. That's something that the state won't allow us to do. So there's specifications on that, and we can help y'all with that. Also, risk management can help you with that because it's on their website as well, as far as size of vehicles you can lease. But then again, the same would go for that. Please let us know who would be driving that leased vehicle from your school, whether it's a coach or teacher or whatever, so we can run a driver's license check on them to make sure they're up to date and current when it comes to that. I think the next one would be your situations where if you charter a bus, this would kind of go under the leased vehicle section. Vince Wyndham is our purchasing director in purchasing, and I'm sure most of you know him. And on his website, on the school board page, he's got all the different charter companies that are available and have been, approved by the school board to use them as a charter company. I know that's not on this paper, but that's something that I want to talk to y'all about because I know a lot of you charter buses at times. So Vince can help y'all with that through the purchasing department and give you the names of the approved charter companies if you choose to charter a bus as well. So that's the ways that we can get you to trips, or you get yourself to trips or things of that nature. The last thing I kind of want to go over is driving. I know some of you may be new coaches or new teachers in the district. We will train you to get your CDL through our department. Bob Martin is our safety CDL trainer, and he's the one that does all of our CDL classes. So you can contact us in transportation, any one of the offices, whichever area you live in, if you're interested, and we can let you know when the next class is. If you want to get your license, we do that for no charge to the schools because it helps y'all and it helps us too when y'all get a license and can help out with your transportation for your trips. Again, I want to say I appreciate all of you that already have a license and drive for your teams or driving a route for us. That helps us tremendously. And I don't want y'all to ever feel like that we're not trying to help y'all when you schedule something and we call and say, can you go 30 minutes later, or can you take 2 buses instead of 3? We're just trying to make ends meet at the last time because we're getting requests from all of y'all, all different schools, and it may be multiple requests on the same day for buses. So we're trying to make that schedule work for everybody to get where you need to go, because that's what our goal is, to get you there and get you there safely. So has anybody got any questions for me about anything that, yes, sir?
Having parents drive, a couple of questions about that. If they were approved this past year, do they have to get reapproved again?
They're still in our system, and if they're going to drive again, just tell them to send us a note, and we'll check to see if they're on the list. If they are, then we get license checks 3 times a year, and if they're still in our system, we'll run another license check on them if they were in there for the spring or whatever. But I would still like for the school to send us their name. We'll just make sure we know who's still driving, if that's possible.
Okay, and then the other thing is, with them driving, are they allowed to carry kids other than their own?
If they send us their information and we check to make sure they have the right liability insurance on that vehicle, and we've done the license check. That's why there's some steps we need to go through if we're going to do that, and make sure your principal is aware of that also. But those are the things that we would need to check.
And then if you get a CDL license, are you required to use it so many times in order to keep it up?
Well, they say as long as you drive at least once in a 12-month period and you do your in-service, which most of y'all do in the summertime, then you're good to go. That CDL will stay valid. Anybody else? All righty, thank you again.
Do you foresee a shortage, any trouble they should be aware of, the drivers? Do you think we're going to be good? Or what do you
Well,
think?
Brian's asking me about a shortage, which, I mean, we've had a shortage for several years now, but it's just been compounded with the COVID thing the last few years. Right now, we are around 35 to 40 bus drivers short. As most of y'all know, we're using mechanics to drive, and we're using secretaries that have a CDL to drive routes. So we're doing everything we can. The superintendent and the board have approved numerous bonus plans for us to hire drivers on and pay them a bonus higher salary. All kind of different things. We're trying to think out of the box to get people to join us and become a bus driver. So we're trying. It's not like we're just sitting on our hands doing nothing, and I want y'all to know that. But we're doing everything we can, and with y'all's help, also, we'll make through somehow or another. So just wanted to let y'all be aware of, where we stand on our drivers and our situation right now. It's a 40-hour class. It's 20 hours in the classroom, going through the state guidelines, and then it's 20 hours out on the bus, learning the bus, backing it up, driving it, things of that nature. And then you take your final third-party test after you do the 40 hours. So depending on your schedule, you could do it within 3 or 4 weeks. It's hard to do during the school year, I know, because you got classes and you may can only do a couple hours a day or something like that. But we will try and fast track anybody that wants to get it that works in the school. That's our goal. Because we know y'all have duties at your school or, your teams that you're coaching for. So we will try and fast track it and work around your schedule. We've done some work on the weekends with people. On Saturdays, I'll pay my trainers to work with y'all whenever they can to make it convenient for y'all. So, and one last thing on this driving routes, if any of y'all are interested in that, the board has agreed to pay y'all your contracted supplemental pay salary to do that. So it's not like you're going to be making I guess a call-in bus driver salary of $12 an hour. So we do that to try to help y'all for helping us. And some people drive a morning route because they have an activity or a team they got to coach in the afternoon. Some people are driving afternoon routes because they can't do it in the morning. We're flexible. We'll work with y'all, whatever y'all want to do on that. So just let us know, and we would appreciate any help we could get from y'all. Thanks.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. Mr. McGinnis and them he was kind of being real polite, but they've done an incredible job of making sure we get buses because, like he said, we've got middle school sports programs going on, high school sports going on. In a given day, he's got tons of requests going out, and somehow he's made it all work. And my only concern, in which he's touched on it, but my only concern is that y'all may fill out bus requests, and if, with COVID hits, I keep my fingers crossed just make sure you've got your bus requests in early, and make sure you're calling and making sure there's no hiccups, because you don't want any surprises like not being able to get a driver when you need it. So just make sure that you're diligent on your end, and just realize they're working as hard as they can to make sure that it just happens smoothly, and they've always been able to make it happen. I just hope COVID doesn't throw a wrench in there. So next is our school board attorney, Mr. Jeff McGinnis. He's going to come and speak to us about many years back. We had a Title IX audit in our county, and he's going to share some of those findings, and then he's going to go over a conflict of interest, which this question comes up through our office several times a year. Even though we go over it, we still have issues with conflict of interest, because as a coach and a teacher, you're putting yourself in a risky spot if you're not aware of some of the incidents that he'll share with you. So this is Mr. Jeff McGinnis.
Good morning, and thank you for the time you put in this morning. We appreciate it very much. I want to thank you personally for the commitment you have to the students in our district and all the things you do that really affect their lives in a positive way, and we appreciate so much the extra time that you commit personally to do that. I want to talk just a little while this morning as we end the morning on Title IX and on the conflicts of interest, as Brian mentioned. In regard to Title IX, we go over this each year because we did a number of years ago have a federal lawsuit in this district over Title IX in athletics. And there is a continuing resolution agreement in place that we need to always be sure that we're reminding all of you about. We remind the principals about it because we're still bound to be sure that we're following those terms. And I'm going to go over some of those provisions for you briefly this morning. Title IX is a comprehensive federal law that has removed many barriers that once prevented people on the basis of sex from participating in educational opportunities and careers of their choice. The Title IX law states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in or be denied the benefits of or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program, activity that receives federal financial assistance. So, because public school districts receive a lot of federal funding, then public school districts clearly have to follow the provisions of Title IX. Now, Title IX covers a lot of areas, but one that we're going to talk about today is the area of athletics. The Title IX law was modeled after the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and they both shared a common purpose, and that was to ensure that public funds from all the people are not utilized in ways that encourage or subsidize or permit or result in prohibited discrimination against some of the people. And so that's where we find the directions from Title IX in our athletic program. Now, in the athletic program, the Title IX regulations prohibit sex discrimination in interscholastic, intercollegiate, club, intramural, or athletics that are offered by a recipient institution. Well, that's the school district because we are a recipient of federal funding. And the regulations include the areas of where they control student interest and abilities, athletic benefits and opportunities, and an area that doesn't impact us, they also regulate athletic financial assistance. Now, in essence, what Title IX requires is that schools treat both sexes of students equally in regard to three distinct aspects of our athletic opportunities. Two of these apply specifically to us in the school district. One is participation opportunities, and the second is treatment of male and female teams. Now, when we talk about student interest and abilities, the regulation, the department uses a three-pronged test to determine whether a school is providing non-discriminatory athletic participation opportunities in compliance with Title IX. And these are the three categories that they'll look at. If OCR were to come into the school district to do an investigation or to audit one of our schools for athletics, this is what they'd be looking for. They'd be trying to determine whether participation opportunities for male and female students are provided in numbers substantially proportionate to the respective enrollment in your school. So that's one standard. And if they find that's in place, then they'll find you're in compliance of that component. Secondly, they would look to see whether the members of one sex have been or are underrepresented among athletes, and whether the school can show a history and continuing practice of program expansion which is demonstrably responsive to the developing interests and abilities of the members of that sex. So if you can show, even if your numbers aren't there, if you can show that you have a continuing history of pushing to offer the athletic opportunities for both sexes, then that can be a way in which they determine you're in compliance. Finally, if they look and see that members of one sex are underrepresented in athletics, and the school, you cannot show a history of having increased opportunities, but if you can prove that the interests and abilities of the members of that sex have been fully and effectively accommodated by your present programs, you may be found in compliance. The three-part test is used to let schools maintain flexibility and control over your athletic programs consistent with the Title IX non-discrimination requirements. If the school has met any part of the three-pronged test, then the Office of Civil Rights will determine that your institution is meeting this requirement. In the second category, the OCR looks at the area of athletic benefits and opportunities. Now, this is the area in which we had the federal suit many, many years ago. And what this requires is, it requires that we provide equal athletic opportunity to the members of both sexes. This does not mean exactly the same services or equipment, but it does mean that male and female athletes receive equal treatment overall in your program. So what they would be looking at are certain opportunities in these areas. They would be looking at these factors: the provision of equipment and supplies, scheduling of games and practice times, travel, opportunity for coaching and academic tutoring, assignment and compensation of coaches and tutors, provisions of locker rooms, practice and competitive facilities, provisions of medical and training facilities and services, publicity, and support services for the athletic program. The OCR realizes that certain, for instance, uniforms may cost more than others by their design and function. So there's not a requirement to spend exactly the same amount of money, for instance, on a football uniform as there would be on a swim team swimsuit or a golf shirt or a tennis shirt. The school cannot, however, provide high-quality uniforms for male teams and low-quality uniforms for female teams, or discriminate in the number of different types of uniforms and uniform parts that you're providing to different teams. For instance, we look at home and away uniforms. We look at practice uniforms, and you simply cannot provide those only to a male team and not provide them equally to a female team. And what I want to review with you are some very specific areas that it's important that you go back to your school and evaluate and just determine that you're still in compliance. These are directly out of the settlement agreement in that lawsuit. The first thing we dealt with was the actual funding. And the settlement required that the school district maintain a system of sport-by-sport accounting for revenues and expenditures that are accounted for in your internal funds for both male and female sports under the guidelines of the Red Book. So that's something hopefully that's being handled through your athletic department and your school bookkeeper. The next category dealt with uniforms, as I just talked about. And what we settled and agreed to do was that the uniforms for male and female sports teams would be comparable both in quality and quantity. Uniforms for one team of one gender will not be replaced on a more frequent basis than uniforms for a team of the other gender for the same sport. So for instance, in those areas where you've got both a male and female team, basketball, or let's use baseball and softball, you should have a uniform replacement schedule and program that is the same for both the male teams and the female teams. Now, this doesn't mean that if you have a safety issue and have to replace some uniforms because of a defect or something like that, that you can't do that whenever that's required. The policy of passing uniforms from one level of a team to another, i.e. from varsity to JV, has to be the same for all teams. So you cannot do that, say, just for football or basketball, or you can't do it for the female teams. And in regard to the male teams, you give the varsity and the JV brand new uniforms. There's no passing down. You've got to do the same for both. If athletic shoes or socks are subsidized or provided to a team of one gender at your school, then we shall ensure that the athletic shoes or socks are provided for a substantially equivalent number of athletes on a team of the other gender. So obviously, if your football program provides socks and cleats, then you're going to have to figure out how to provide similar equipment for an equal number of female athletes on other teams. If the school provides uniforms with participants' names stitched on them or ironed on them, with logos or team names on them, the number or stitching letters on the uniforms for one team of one gender, you'll provide similar uniforms with participant names, logos, and stitching on uniforms for a team of the other gender. Now, this is subject to the coach's final discretion for that particular team. And I'll tell you where this came. When we were in the midst of this lawsuit, we literally had a series of days when OCR, the Office of Civil Rights, had people in here investigating and reviewing. And we went over to one of the high school gymnasiums one day and literally set out a dozen tables and required high schools to all come in there and bring their uniforms in for all their teams, and they were all laid out. And this got to the point that the investigators were literally touching the fabric, checking the thickness of fabrics, the quality of fabrics, and also looking at something that you need to remember. They were looking to see, are the male teams' names and numbers stitched onto those jerseys? Are the female athletes' names and numbers stitched on or simply ironed on? And they want equality in regard to how that's done. So you need to look at the uniforms that all the teams in your schools are using, and while they do not have to be exact, and you don't have to spend the same money, because some of them do cost more, you've got to be sure that you're not offering a different quality and quantity of uniform to female teams. Now, the other thing to remember is that in regard to your weight rooms, in the lawsuit we agreed that across the school district, dumbbell weights in all of our weight rooms would include at least these weights, 2, 3, 5, 8, and 10 pounds. And we agreed that we would ensure that schedules were developed that provided female athletes equivalent use of weight training facilities as compared to male athletes. And once again, that's based upon a coach's needs for their team and their schedules, but you've got to be sure that these weight room facilities are as equally available to the male and female teams when you do your scheduling. The district also agreed that if you're going to offer pregame meals or feeding programs to any male athletes, unless those are being provided in a private home by some of their parents or being paid for by their parents at another location, then meals of substantially equivalent quality and frequency have to be provided to a similar number of female athletes. So just keep that in mind. I don't know how many of you still have team meals, pregame meals, but if you're doing that, be certain that you're balancing that across both male and female teams. The district agreed that facilities, if being made available to athletes' families to provide these feeding opportunities, then they would be made available on a gender-neutral basis to families of all the athletes. Softball and baseball fields. The settlement required that those fields be maintained on an equivalent basis. And what we saw back then were that the baseball field might have brand new wind screening around it, might have a nice big rubberized guard across the top of the fences, and they would go look at a softball field and there would be no wind screening, no guard. And so we agreed those fields have got to be maintained equivalently. So you need to be always watching those baseball and softball facilities to ensure that you're having that same quality of care of the fields and of the fencing and equipment around those fields. Also, back then, it determined you go to a baseball field and they might have 40 donor signs on their outfield fences. They'd go to a softball field, there'd be none. So we agreed in the settlement that we would maintain a policy of ensuring that softball teams were allowed to solicit and display advertising in accordance with the board's advertising policies on the perimeter fencing of softball fields. And I think today you'll see that happens, but just know that was part of this agreement. We also agreed that bleachers would be provided at every softball field in the district to adequately seat the spectators. The seating can be accommodated by portable bleachers, which can be relocated at the conclusion of certain seasons. But you need to be sure at your school that when it is softball season, that there are bleachers available on your softball fields for their spectators. And then we also agreed that there would be a program of equal sports drinks provided to both male and female teams. So you need to be careful that if the football team has a big stock of whatever sports drink you're providing in coolers, that you ensure that female teams have access to those same type things. Now that's what I wanted to brief you on Title IX. Are there any questions about that part of my comment? Yes, sir.
I don't understand how Okaloosa County can require that the baseball and the softball be equal. The coaches are the ones raising the money for their program. So if I'm a baseball coach and I set it up to where I've got a great facility and I've done all the work to get all the signs, why do I got to do the same thing for softball?
Well, I'm not saying that the baseball coach has to do it. I'm saying that the softball coach, the principal, the athletic director, they have to be certain that they are allowing the softball teams and their field facility to have those same opportunities and be maintained the same as you are maintaining the baseball field. It really has nothing to do with how much money the baseball coach may raise for baseball. That just puts pressure on the school and the softball program to be sure that somehow you find a way that they have a chance to go raise money, have signs on the fields, that their field is mowed and fertilized and cared for like a baseball field, although I know some of them have clay infields and not grass, but we're just talking about ensuring that you maintain the fields for those teams in the same manner in an equivalent way. And it's not Okaloosa County requiring that, that's the federal law that says that's how you will treat both male and female athletes in regard to their opportunities for those fields. Right. What we're trying to balance is and we appreciate as a district every penny of every donation that teams get. We need that very much. But you just have to be careful that even if it's self-help and even if they've got a huge booster club, you just can't let the similar program of the other gender be dwindling and their field's not being maintained and they don't have the same equipment and they don't have the same safety standards and they don't have the same uniforms. That's just the law. That's Title IX. We have to ensure that. So I'm not saying that one team can't have a big field house and press boxes and all these things, but if you do, you've got to make some accommodations. Not saying that both groups have to have the same things, but you can't have a press box on the baseball field and nothing but a folding table sitting at a softball field for the scorers or announcers to sit at. I mean, you need to have some comparable facility there for that. We even had to go to the extent of concession stands, and back when this happened, the district bought a whole group of portable mobile concession trailers. And that was done specifically to be sure that we could offer the opportunity, if the baseball team had a concession stand, there needed to be some type of facility or opportunity on the softball field for concessions to be offered and sold. And so that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about exact matches of things. We're talking about the opportunity for those same things to be available.
So the opportunity to fundraise for it.
Yes.
If our baseball coach fundraise for a press box, then we need to make sure our softball coach has the opportunity to say.
That's correct.
If our baseball coach spends 20 hours on the field to maintain it and put his money in it, the softball coach can do the same.
They have to be given the opportunity to do that. Now, I'm not saying that because a baseball coach works 20 extra hours a week on the field, that a softball coach is mandated to go work 20 extra hours on the field. What I'm saying is, if the baseball coach is working on that field and the grass and things are being cared for in regard to district or school resources, then the principal or the athletic director or the coach has got to have the ability to have that softball field maintained at an equivalent level. Now, just because you choose to go way over the level doesn't mean everybody has to go way over the level, but you have to have a basic equivalency in the maintenance and care of those fields. Any other questions?
Limited to your own school campus, or is this district-wide, from school to school?
Every school in the district that offers athletic programs is expected to meet these standards.
What if one school has better than the other facility? What is the standard at this school?
Okay, and what I'll say is this. We want the school to meet the standards, but I will give you a good example that will answer your question. When that investigation was going on, there was a particular school in the district that had very poor facilities for both male and female athletes. And that was fine, because they were equally bad. Now, I know that sounds odd, but I'm just saying that at that school site, male and female athletes were being provided the same level. It was just a lower level of facilities and things like that, but they were the same. And so it didn't mean that because across town a school had a 2-story press box with stairs on it, that this school across town had to go get a 2-story press box with stairs. It's compared at that school site how those athletes are being provided. That's right. Now, the district overall has to maintain Title IX equality across all programs, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every school is going to have the same level of facilities available to male and female athletes.
The district has to maintain Title IX equality.
Yes, sir. And the district looks to the schools that are managing these athletic programs to do their part to ensure that at that campus, that equivalency is maintained.
Thank you, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Any other questions on Title IX? All right, let me go over with you one other topic today, and this is important. I want to explain to you what can result if we're not careful in the area of conflicts of interest for you as coaches and teachers if you're teaching. If you have an issue in which you get caught up in a conflict of interest, and what we're talking about primarily is when you end up in a situation that for any reason you've got some kind of a side job or a side program going on, which could be lessons or travel ball of some kind, things like that. If you get into that situation and it's determined to have been a conflict of interest in your job with the district because of you being paid by students or families for other things, that's a serious matter. That's a matter that likely would be reported to professional practices, would be investigated not only in the district, at the district level, but probably by the state level, could impact your teacher certificate. So we want you to know it's a very serious matter, and that's why we try to keep you updated and keep you at least aware, not so that you remember every regulation, but just so that you think about before you do something like that, I better check on this. I better be sure I know if I'm in safe territory with what I'm doing. So that's the point of these scenarios that were given to you in writing by Brian's office. Now, one thing I do want to mention to you, you're going to be getting an updated conflict of interest questions and answers document, because there is a a typo on this one, and the word is critical, and they're going to redo this, but several of these scenarios, the word not is missing. And that changes the entire answer to those questions I think it's 4, 5, and then B, C, and 8. So they're going to update that and resend that to you. Please be sure that if you're going to review that with other coaches or people at your school, that you wait and get the revised, updated handout. Now, in regard to these scenarios, I'm not going to go through them all, but I wanted to let you know the one I want you to really think about, number 3, and there are, at times, there are coaches that are affiliated with outside companies and groups that may be trying to sell to the school. Well, what this is saying is, does a conflict of interest exist when a school's coach requires students to purchase their uniforms or shirts from him or her, or from a company that he or she may benefit from financially? And the answer is yes. If an employee owns an interest in a company or is paid a salary or commission by a company for such sales, there is a conflict of interest. So please do not get yourself in that situation where you're out promoting to athletes at your school a requirement to purchase things from a company that you either have an interest in or that you're compensated by. Then, the other one I want to go over with you, because some of these are similar, a school basketball coach is also a PE teacher at the school and is provided with a 6-period basketball class for the basketball team. Is there a conflict of interest if he or she invites the school's basketball players to play on his or her traveling club team, which students must pay to be a part of if the seasons do not occur or overlap at the same time? Now, what's important about this question is, as an employee of the district, you've got to answer this from 2 standpoints. You've got to answer it as a coach, and you've also got to answer it if you're a teacher as a teacher, because there's a potential conflict in both situations. So what the Ethics Commission has said is that a public school teacher or coach is not prohibited, and that's the word that's missing from that handout, is not prohibited from privately tutoring or providing supplemental instruction to public school students, or from offering private summer programs to students, provided that the students being tutored, instructed, or offered the programs are not students in or on the teacher or coach's classes, groups, instructional groups, sports tryouts, or sports teams at the time the tutoring or instruction is being offered and at the time it's going on. So there's 2 things. You cannot market your travel team during a time when you have those students in your class or on your team. And you cannot offer and carry out the travel team activities for pay at a time when those students are on your team or in a tryout mode or in your classroom. The reason it covers both your classroom and your teams are that in either situation, there's a chance that those students could feel pressured or intimidated to have to be on that travel team and pay you, because it could either affect their academic performance in the classroom or their ability to be on your teams in the athletic area. So please remember, it's a 2-pronged test you need to look at if you're participating individually in these type outside activities where there's compensation involved. You'll see some other scenarios where we deal with a coach who's also a math teacher. And then we deal with this is the other one, though, is important. A school's basketball coach tells his or her players at the end of the season that it is important for them to maintain and continue to improve their skills. Therefore, the coach expects all of the players to sign up and play on his or her travel team. The fee to play is only going to be $100 a month. The answer here actually has 2 parts. First, you have to look at that same conflict we just talked about. Did you offer and market the travel team while they were on your team or while they were in your classroom? But secondly, there's a big concern in this kind of scenario that you may have created an additional ethics concern because you strongly encouraged each of them to sign up for your travel team in off-season so they could continue to be prepared for the next year. So you got two different problems in that scenario. First is the whole issue of even being on the travel team and paying you, but secondly is the pressure that could be determined that you put onto those kids to have to go sign up. It affects things that we see when it comes time for tryouts. I promise you, if a kid doesn't make the team, we'll be hearing from some parent that says, well, you know that back in the end of the last school year, that coach said they had to all go sign up for the travel team, and we couldn't afford to do that, so we didn't do it. And we've noticed that everybody that was on the travel team all summer made the team. My child didn't make the team, and we weren't on the travel team. That's going to put a coach in a really bad situation. And we just want you to avoid those type situations. I'd ask you to review these other scenarios, and please feel free to contact Brian's office if you want to go over conflict situations. We're here to help you, to protect you, to keep you from getting yourself in those kind of troublesome situations. And please use us as a resource. We're happy to answer questions about any type of a conflict situation that you may be concerned about, because we want you to avoid those. Any questions about that? Thank you very much.
All right. So lastly, I want to introduce you to our equity officer, Mr. Chapman, and he's going to come and just say a couple of words. And with Mr. Chapman, he helps throughout the district in HR, human resources, and he gets involved when there's investigations. And hopefully we won't have any investigations, but if there are investigations and he's involved, it's usually an employment issue. And so he's going to say a couple of words to kind of hopefully give you some good advice.
Thank you. Again, I'm Steve Chapman, the Equity Specialist for the school district. I deal a lot with policies and investigations, and I do want to recognize my partner, Mr. Moore, if he would stand. He's also one of our investigators as well. So with all that being said, if we do everything that you've been instructed on today, you probably won't have many visits from us. One of the things that I want to share is equity policies. And I'm not going to read all the policies to you, but I do want to make mention of them. We do have equity policy 0626, prohibiting discrimination. And when I say discrimination, we're talking about several areas, and we're going to go over those areas. Our expectations in Okaloosa County School District is that all employees and volunteers are expected to work with other employees, to teach students and to supervise or to be supervised in their work by other employees without regard to race, color, religion, sex, national or ethnic origin, age, marital status, pregnancy, or disability. And following 0626, we have 0627, which is also our equity policy prohibiting harassment of those same classifications. We have those in place for a reason, and that's to keep everybody, all of our employees, students, everyone, to make sure that we're following policies so that we can all do our job without feeling harassed or discriminated against. 0628 is the actual reporting process as far as what does that entails. But let me say this, is that if you're involved with a situation where it's dealing with harassment or discrimination, and if anything comes up about a student in the middle of that process, dealing with any type of abuse and so forth, make sure, again, I'm sure you've had it, that we all mandate reporters that we take care and make those phone calls. Speaking of harassment, one of the areas that now I'm also the coordinator for is Title IX, and I know you've heard a lot about Title IX from Ms. McGinnis, but I deal with more of the sexual harassment side of the house on those issues. And when I say Title IX and sexual harassment, that is, of course, we know it's prohibited in our district, and we have an obligation that if we know of it or hear of it, even if it's not involving us, we have an obligation to speak up and to share those concerns. Sexual harassment is prohibited on all school district properties and also at any school district sponsored events or activities. If you ever feel that you've been sexually harassed or students have, or come to your knowledge, make sure that you make the correct contact. In my office, of course, like I said, I'm the Title IX coordinator for the district. Call our office, make sure you notify your principal. In other words, I don't want you to take anything that we may have taken 10 years ago and just said, as kids being kids. Don't put yourself in that position. Make those phone calls and so forth. If anybody ever called me, and I say this often, is that if you call me and ask, should I call DCF or whoever, you're never going to hear out my mouth not to call DCF. Because if you feel enough that I need to ask the question, well, you need to go ahead and make the phone call. And I've made several calls myself. But with all that being said, Title IX is a huge ordeal. Not just in the athletic side of the house, but as far as sexual harassment goes as well. You are obligated. It's not just, just looking out for your friend, your coach, other individuals. You're obligated that if there's knowledge of sexual harassment, that it must be reported. Call my office, notify, make sure you make those notifications. Sexual harassment is any unwelcome conduct determined to be by a reasonable person to be so severe, pervasive, or objectively offensive that it effectively denies a person equal access to the district's education program or activity. Again, if you're dealing with students and you hear something, don't just brush it off. Make sure that we address it appropriately. We have Equity Policy 0434. I'm not going to go into that. That's our student equity policy. Again, if a student comes to you with concerns, make sure that we address those appropriately. And if you ever have questions when it comes to things of equity, our office is definitely a resource. I'd rather have a conversation with you, 15 minutes, 30-minute conversation, than a 2-week, 2-month investigation. Investigations are intense. It's nothing that I would want to volunteer myself to go through. Is even if you come out on the other side that maybe you have found it was unsubstantiated, so maybe you didn't do what was alleged. It's still a process. So I want you to be mindful of that. And on the same token, be mindful that even if we're doing an internal investigation, there will be a professional practice investigation as well. We have to notify the Office of Professional Practice within 30 days and share with them what we've got going on and so forth. So they could have a totally separate, independent investigation dealing with your certificate. I'm going to deal with policies and how that affects our school district and so forth, but they're going to be dealing with your certificate. So keep that in mind. Now, just something really simple, how something can totally get out of hand and happen so quickly. If I'm a coach and just say, for example, so back in the day, a few years back, I used to play basketball. And I've had some awesome coaches, but as a coach for today, if you went to grab a kid and snatch a kid and say, get in here or something like that, nothing may happen. However, if the right parent complains, it could be a series of things happen. It may be that, first of all, DCF can call if we got some kind of injury or something. Law enforcement is going to be notified. And if those things happen, and let's say DCF took a case and law enforcement took a case, more than likely the HR is going to be notified, and they're going to let you know that at this time you're going to be probably suspended with pay during the course of the investigation. Once those agencies close out their case, if it's a criminal investigation, grabbing a kid and so forth, then we get involved. But usually until they close their case out, which they're not on our same time schedule that we are. So if they have a bunch of cases out in the community, I've seen cases go on for 3, 4, 5, 6 months before we can even investigate internally. So keep that in mind. And again, you may come out on the other side that you're clear, but don't put yourself in that position where, you got to go and testify. Did you grab? Did you do this? Did you do so forth? And same thing, guys, go with language. I know as coaches, sometimes I've known coaches use colorful language. Well, let me just say this, and some individuals may say, you know what, I've heard it, this is who I am, they just got to deal with it. We're not raising soft kids, we're not doing this, but times have totally changed. And if we are using profanity, and this can be proven, it's going to be a violation of our policies, just so we know that. So, again, is that word worth a possible investigation? And so what I want us to think about is how can we get away from it, not get close to it, or what can I do? Let's just stay away from those areas. Again, I don't want to put my career or your career in the hands of a student's testimony, because at that moment I was out of control of my emotions or whatever. And again, every year I deal with this. I have usually a couple throughout the year that end up in an investigation for the very same thing I'm sharing with you today. So just keep that in mind. Protect yourself. Couple things. Another thing that I see a lot of, like a trend that we see dealing with not just coaches but through the school in general, again, it may sound like we're saying, the kids are becoming soft and so forth. I get all of those pieces. Totally get it. But I've also been in the courtroom and testifying on behalf of the school district and so forth, so I totally get those pieces. But so shall not intentionally expose a student to an unnecessary embarrassment or disparagement. Whereas you can't call kids names and all this type of stuff. Yes, you may get away with it. You may know coach did all their lives. All it takes is one parent that's going to complain about it. And then, yeah, we're going to have an investigation. Again, it may not be everything will end in termination. It may be a letter of concern or coaching and counseling or whatever. But why put ourselves in those situations? So from the equity office, my job is to just make sure that we are abiding by our policies and doing those things so that you can do your job coaching, having that impact on our kids, and yet and still protecting yourself and your career as well. And all of those scenarios, conflict of interest and so forth that Ms. McGinnis said in your handouts, I would highly recommend that you do review those because usually we have one or two of those come our way a year as well with conflict of interest. My kid didn't make the team, but everybody that went to this particular location, all of them made the team. And it may be they're just better, I don't know, but it's an investigation, usually how it works out. So all I'm saying is that when we leave this place today and we start our year off, we all got to make decisions. And what I do, I don't get personal about it. I just get the facts, look at our policies, write reports, submit it to my boss and superintendent, and they go from there. So again, I'm a resource. Mr. Moore is a resource for you as well. And I truly rather have a conversation with you as opposed to an investigation. That's it for equity. Is there any questions for me?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. All right, so that's the end of our coaches thing.